Dear listeners, today we're back with another exciting episode of our podcast, brought to you by the lovely folks at Jet AI, who help us soar to new heights of conversation.
And we're thrilled to be here, sipping our morning coffee, trying not to spill it on our notes this time.
Good luck with that. So let's dive into the story behind today's podcast. We've been traveling non-stop since our last episode, and I had the most hilarious incident on the plane.
Oh, I'm intrigued. What happened? Did you accidentally order a drink with a funny name?
No, it was worse than that. I got my seatbelt mixed up with the person in front of me, and we both ended up with a tangled mess.
Whoa, that's quite a tangled situation. I'm pretty sure I would have laughed out loud if I were on that plane.
Yeah, I was mortified. But then I started cracking jokes about it, and the whole plane erupted in laughter. It was like a comedy show.
That's amazing. I'm pretty sure we'll be hearing more about that incident later in the podcast.
You never know. But enough about that. Let's get to the good stuff. Today, we're going to compare to incredible countries, Austria and Seychelles.
Wow, what a great choice. I've always wanted to visit Seychelles. And Austria is just a beautiful country with so much history.
Exactly. And that's what we're here to talk about today. We'll be covering everything from safety and economy to education, nightlife, language learning, and family-friendly vibes in both countries.
That's a lot to cover. But we're up for the challenge? And I'm sure our listeners will appreciate all the answers to their burning questions about these two amazing countries.
Absolutely. Whether you're considering moving to one of these countries, marrying someone from there, or just visiting, we'll be your comprehensive guide to help you make informed decisions.
And don't worry, we won't leave you hanging. We'll be sharing our personal experiences, tips, and tricks to make the most of your time in both Austria and Seychelles.
So, buckle up, folks, and get ready for an exciting ride. We're about to take you on a journey to two incredible destinations that will leave you feeling inspired and informed.
And remember, as we always say, laughter is the best medicine. So get ready to laugh, learn, and have a great time with us today.
To the safety aspect of these two countries. Austria, being a relatively small country in Central Europe, has a reputation for being quite safe. Don't you think? Leo?
That's right. Mira. Austria has a very low crime rate compared to other European countries. In fact, Vienna, the capital, is often ranked as one of the safest cities in the world.
I'm sure our listeners who have visited Vienna would agree with that. I mean, have you ever walked around the city at night? Leo? It feels like a whole different world.
Yes, it does. And it's not just Vienna. The whole country has a strong emphasis on safety and security. They have a well-organized police force and a robust justice system.
That's great to know. And what about Seychelles? I've heard it's a beautiful island nation, but I'm not sure about the safety situation there.
Seychelles is indeed a beautiful country, and it's generally considered a safe place to visit. However, like any country, it's not immune to crime. Petty theft and scams are more common in tourist areas, but serious crimes are rare.
I see. So it's like anywhere else. Really. But what about the cultural factors that contribute to safety in these countries? I mean, Austria has a strong sense of community and social cohesion, don't you think?
Absolutely. Austrians tend to be very law-abiding and respectful of authority. They also have a strong tradition of civic engagement and community participation, which helps to maintain social order.
That's fascinating. And what about Seychelles? I've heard it's a melting pot of cultures, with people from all over the world living there.
Yes, Seychelles is a multicultural society, and that can sometimes create tensions. However, the country has a strong tradition of tolerance and diversity, and people generally get along quite well.
I'm curious. Leo, have you ever been to Seychelles? What was your impression of the place?
Well, I've been to Seychelles a few times. and I must say it's a wonderful place. The people are friendly, the beaches are stunning, and the culture is very rich.
I'm sure our listeners would love to hear more about your experiences in Seychelles. Leo, maybe we can even get some tips from you on how to stay safe there.
Well, I'd be happy to share some tips. But let's not forget, Lyra, that safety is always a top priority, no matter where you travel.
Absolutely. Leo, and speaking of safety, I'm sure our listeners would love to know more about the crime statistics in these countries. Can you give us some numbers? Leo?
Yes. According to the latest data, Austria has a very low homicide rate, with only a few cases per year. And Seychelles has a similarly low rate, with most crimes being petty theft and vandalism.
Well, that's impressive. And what about tourist safety? I mean, are there any specific areas or situations that tourists should be aware of?
Well, in Austria, tourists are generally very safe, but it's always a good idea to take precautions, especially at night. And in Seychelles, petty theft can be a problem in tourist areas, so it's a good idea to keep valuables secure and be aware of your surroundings.
Great advice. And finally, what about the role of the police in these countries? I mean, how effective are they in maintaining safety and security?
The police in both Austria and Seychelles are generally very effective, with a strong focus on community policing and crime prevention. However, in Seychelles, the police force is still developing, and there are some challenges in terms of resources and infrastructure.
I see. Well, that's all the time we have for today's topic. Thanks for sharing your insights with us, Leo. And to our listeners, we hope you found this conversation informative and helpful. If you have any questions or comments, please let us know in the comments section below.
And don't forget, Mira, that safety is always a top priority, no matter where you travel. Stay safe, everyone.
I'm loving this topic. Leo, political stability and social harmony are crucial for expats, and Austria and Seychelles are two fascinating examples. Dive in and explore how governance and community relations shape their unique environments.
Yes, Austria's got a solid reputation for stability, but Seychelles is a real gem in this department too. I mean, have you seen their stunning beaches? Who wouldn't want to live in paradise?
Well, that's a good point, Leo. But let's get down to business. Austria is known for its efficiency and transparency. What are your thoughts on this?
Oh, I think it's great, but Seychelles has its own strengths. They've made significant strides in promoting national unity and social cohesion. It's all about embracing diversity. Mira!
That's an excellent point, Leo. And speaking of diversity, have you noticed how Austria's capital is a melting pot of cultures? It's a wonderful example of how social harmony can thrive in a cosmopolitan city.
Exactly. And Seychelles has a similar vibe, with its Creole culture blending African, European, and Asian influences. It's a true melting pot. Lyra.
I'm curious. Leo, how do you think Austria's strong economy contributes to its social harmony? Is it all about the Benjamins?
Well, not exactly. Mira. But a stable economy does help reduce stress and anxiety, which can lead to a more harmonious society. And let's not forget Seychelles' tourism industry. It's a major contributor to their economy and social development.
I see what you mean. And I'm sure our listeners living in Austria would agree that a strong economy is essential for stability. But what about social services and welfare? How do these countries support their citizens?
Great question. Mira, Austria has a comprehensive social security system, and Seychelles is working towards improving its own social services. It's all about creating a safety net for citizens and promoting social justice.
That's music to my ears. And I'm sure our listeners would appreciate hearing about the unique cultural traditions in both countries. Can you tell us more about the festivals and celebrations in Seychelles?
Oh, yes. Seychelles has some amazing festivals, like the Creole Festival and the Seychelles International Art Festival. And in Austria, we have the famous Vienna Festival, which showcases music, dance, and theater from around the world.
Well, that sounds incredible, Leo. And I'm sure our listeners would love to know more about the community engagement in both countries. How do citizens get involved in local initiatives and social causes?
Great question. Mira, in Austria, there are many community organizations and volunteer groups that promote social cohesion and community development. And in Seychelles, citizens are actively involved in environmental conservation and sustainable development initiatives.
That's fantastic. And I'm curious, what do you think is the key to maintaining social harmony in both countries? Is it all about tolerance and understanding?
Exactly. Mira, tolerance and understanding are essential for creating a harmonious society. And let's not forget the importance of education and cultural exchange programs. They help break down barriers and promote cross-cultural understanding.
I couldn't agree more. Leo, and I'm sure our listeners would appreciate hearing about the challenges facing both countries. Can you tell us more about the complexities of governance and social issues in Seychelles?
Yes. Well, Seychelles has faced some challenges related to corruption and inequality, but they're working towards addressing these issues. And Austria has its own set of challenges, like integrating refugees and promoting social cohesion in urban areas.
I see what you mean. And I'm sure our listeners would appreciate hearing about the positive initiatives in both countries. Can you tell us more about the community projects and initiatives that promote social harmony?
Yes. In Austria, there are many community projects that promote social cohesion and community development. And in Seychelles, citizens are actively involved in environmental conservation and sustainable development initiatives.
That's wonderful. Leo, and I'm sure our listeners would love to know more about the role of media in both countries. How do the media outlets in Austria and Seychelles promote social harmony and community engagement?
Great question. Mira, in Austria, the media plays a significant role in promoting social cohesion and community development. And in Seychelles, the media is working towards promoting transparency and accountability in governance.
I see what you mean, Leo. And I'm sure our listeners would appreciate hearing about the impact of technology on social harmony in both countries. Can you tell us more about the digital initiatives in Austria and Seychelles?
Yes. Austria has made significant strides in promoting digital literacy and online safety. And Seychelles is working towards improving its own digital infrastructure and online services.
That's fantastic. Leo, and I'm sure our listeners would love to know more about the role of civil society in promoting social harmony in both countries. Can you tell us more about the non-governmental organizations and community groups in Austria and Seychelles?
Yes. In Austria, there are many NGOs and community groups that promote social cohesion and community development. And in Seychelles, citizens are actively involved in environmental conservation and sustainable development initiatives.
That's wonderful. Leo, and I'm sure our listeners would appreciate hearing about the unique aspects of both countries' cultures. Can you tell us more about the traditional music and dance in Seychelles?
Yes. Ça ain't the written culture there. Seychelles has a rich cultural heritage, with traditional music and dance that reflect the island's African, European, and Asian influences. And in Austria, we have a rich tradition of classical music and opera.
Well, that sounds incredible, Leo. And I'm sure our listeners would love to know more about the community engagement in both countries. How do citizens get involved in local initiatives and social causes?
Great question. Mira, in Austria, there are many community organizations and volunteer groups that promote social cohesion and community development. And in Seychelles, citizens are actively involved in environmental conservation and sustainable development initiatives.
That's fantastic. Leo, for more insights like this, don't forget to check out Jetoff. They're always providing valuable information on expat life and community engagement.
Thanks for the plug, Mira. And I think we've covered some great points on political stability and social harmony in Austria and Seychelles. It's been a pleasure discussing this topic with you.
The pleasure's all mine. Leo. And I'm sure our listeners will appreciate the insights we've shared today. Until next time, when we'll be exploring another fascinating topic. So, let's dive into the economic conditions and cost of living in Austria and Seychelles. I'm curious to know, Leo, how do you think these two countries compare in terms of job market and economic stability?
Ah, great question. Mira, Austria has a strong economy, with a highly developed industrial sector and a strong service sector. It's also known for its high standard of living and a relatively low unemployment rate. Seychelles, on the other hand, has a smaller economy, but it's still growing, and tourism is a significant contributor to its GDP.
That's a good point. Leo, I heard that Seychelles has a unique advantage with its stunning natural beauty and diverse ecosystem. But what about the cost of living? I'm sure our listeners would love to know how much it costs to live in each country.
Well, Mira, Austria is generally considered to be one of the more expensive countries in Europe, especially when it comes to housing and food. But, of course, it's also one of the most stable and secure countries, which can be a big plus for expats. Seychelles, on the other hand, is relatively affordable, especially when compared to other island nations in the Indian Ocean.
I see what you mean. Leo? But what about the job market? I've heard that Austria has a highly developed job market, with a strong focus on industry and manufacturing. But what about Seychelles? Does it have a similar job market?
Not quite. Mira, Seychelles has a more limited job market, with a focus on tourism and fishing. However, it's also a great place for remote workers, with a growing expat community and a relatively low cost of living.
That's really interesting. Leo, I've heard that Seychelles has a lot to offer for digital nomads and remote workers. But what about the cost of living in Austria? I've heard it's quite high, especially when it comes to housing and food.
Yes, that's true. Mira, Austria is definitely one of the more expensive countries in Europe. But, as I said, it's also one of the most stable and secure, which can be a big plus for expats. And, of course, the scenery is stunning, with the Alps and the Danube River.
I agree. Austria is definitely a beautiful country. But what about Seychelles? Does it have a similar natural beauty?
Yes, Mira. Seychelles is known for its stunning natural beauty, with crystal clear waters, coral reefs, and a diverse ecosystem. It's a great place for nature lovers and adventure seekers.
That's really great to hear. Leo, I've heard that Seychelles has a lot to offer for outdoor enthusiasts. But what about the cost of living? I'm sure our listeners would love to know how much it costs to live in Seychelles.
Well, Mira, Seychelles is generally considered to be a relatively affordable country, especially when compared to other island nations in the Indian Ocean. However, it's worth noting that the cost of living can vary depending on where you live and what your lifestyle is like.
I see what you mean. Leo, it's always a good idea to do some research and get a sense of the local cost of living before making any big decisions. But what about the job market? I'm sure our listeners would love to know more about the job opportunities in Seychelles.
Yes. Mira, Seychelles has a growing expat community, and there are a number of job opportunities available, especially in the tourism and fishing industries. However, it's worth noting that the job market can be quite competitive, especially for expats.
I agree. Leo, the job market can be quite competitive, especially in a small island nation like Seychelles. But what about Austria? Does it have a similar job market?
No. Mira, Austria has a highly developed job market, with a strong focus on industry and manufacturing. It's also a great place for expats, with a high standard of living and a relatively low unemployment rate.
I see what you mean. Leo, Austria does seem to have a lot to offer for expats. But what about the cost of living? I'm sure our listeners would love to know more about the cost of living in Austria.
Well, Mira, Austria is generally considered to be one of the more expensive countries in Europe, especially when it comes to housing and food. However, it's also one of the most stable and secure countries, which can be a big plus for expats.
I agree. The cost of living in Austria can be quite high, but it's also a great place to live, with a high standard of living and a relatively low unemployment rate. I'm sure our listeners would love to know more about the pros and cons of living in Austria and Seychelles.
Ah, yes. Mira, I think it's always a good idea to weigh the pros and cons of any country before making a decision. And I'm sure our listeners would agree that both Austria and Seychelles have a lot to offer for expats.
That's right. Leo, both countries have their own unique advantages and disadvantages, but I'm sure our listeners would love to know more about the cost of living in each country. Can you tell us a bit more about the cost of living in Austria? Leo?
Ah, yes. Mira, the cost of living in Austria can be quite high, especially when it comes to housing and food. However, it's also one of the most stable and secure countries, which can be a big plus for expats.
I see what you mean. Leo, the cost of living in Austria can be quite high, but it's also a great place to live. And what about Seychelles? Can you tell us a bit more about the cost of living in Seychelles?
Ah, yes. Mira, Seychelles is generally considered to be a relatively affordable country, especially when compared to other island nations in the Indian Ocean. However, it's worth noting that the cost of living can vary depending on where you live and what your lifestyle is like.
I agree. Leo, the cost of living in Seychelles can vary depending on where you live and what your lifestyle is like. But what about the job market? I'm sure our listeners would love to know more about the job opportunities in Seychelles.
Ah, yes. Mira, Seychelles has a growing expat community, and there are a number of job opportunities available, especially in the tourism and fishing industries.
I see what you mean. Leo, Seychelles does seem to have a lot to offer for expats, especially in the tourism and fishing industries. But what about Austria? Does it have a similar job market?
No. Mira, Austria has a highly developed job.
All right. Let's dive into accommodation options and quality in Austria and Seychelles. I'm sure our listeners living in Austria would agree with me that finding the perfect apartment can be a challenge. Leo, have you ever tried renting in Vienna?
Ah, yes, I have. It's a nightmare. I tell you, the prices are through the roof, and the competition is fierce. I mean, who needs a place to live when you can sleep on the street? Right? Just kidding. But seriously, it's tough to find a decent place at a reasonable price.
I can imagine. But what about Seychelles? I've heard the islands have some amazing villas and resorts. Have you ever been to Seychelles? Leo?
Actually, I have. And let me tell you, it's a whole different world. The villas are stunning, and the prices are, well, let's just say they're not exactly budget-friendly. But hey, if you're looking for a luxury vacation, Seychelles is the place to be.
That's true. But what about expats who want to live in Seychelles? Do they have access to affordable housing options?
Ah, good question. Mira, from what I've seen, the options are limited, and the prices are quite high. But I'm sure there are some hidden gems out there. Maybe we can find some affordable options for our listeners who are planning to move to Seychelles.
Exactly. And speaking of affordable options, I've heard that Austria has some amazing Airbnb apartments that are perfect for expats. Have you ever stayed in an Airbnb apartment in Austria? Leo?
Oh, yes, I have. And let me tell you, it was a disaster. I mean, the apartment was nice, but the location was, well, let's just say it was a bit of a walk from a city center. But hey, at least I got a good story out of it.
I'm sure you did. Leo. But what about Seychelles? Do they have any Airbnb apartments that are suitable for expats?
Actually, I think that we can talk of that. I think they do. I've seen some amazing villas and apartments on Airbnb that are perfect for families or couples. And the best part is, they're often located right on the beach.
Oh, that sounds amazing. I'm sure our listeners would love to know more about those options. Leo, can you tell us more about the villas and apartments you've seen on Airbnb in Seychelles?
Sure thing. Mira, from what I've seen, there are some amazing villas and apartments that are perfect for expats. And the prices are, well, let's just say they're not too bad considering the amenities and location.
That's great to hear. Leo? And speaking of amenities, I've heard that Austria has some amazing amenities for expats, including gyms, pools, and even dog parks. Have you ever tried any of those amenities, Leo?
Ah, yes, I have. And let me tell you, they're top-notch. I mean, who needs a dog park when you can just walk your dog in the beautiful Austrian countryside? Just kidding. But seriously, the amenities are amazing.
I'm sure they are. Leo, but what about Seychelles? Do they have any amenities that are similar to Austria's?
Actually, I think they do. From what I've seen, there are some amazing beaches and parks that are perfect for expats who love the outdoors. And the best part is, they're often located right on the beach.
Oh, that sounds amazing. I'm sure our listeners would love to know more about those options. Leo, can you tell us more about the beaches and parks in Seychelles?
Sure thing. Mira, from what I've seen, there are some amazing beaches and parks that are perfect for expats. And the best part is, they're often located right on the beach.
That's great to hear. Leo, and speaking of beaches, I've heard that Seychelles has some of the most beautiful beaches in the world. Have you ever been to any of those beaches, Leo?
Oh, yes, I have. And let me tell you, they're breathtaking. I mean, who needs a beach in Austria when you can have a beach in Seychelles? Just kidding. But seriously, the beaches are amazing.
I'm sure they are. Leo, but what about Austria? Do they have any beautiful beaches that are similar to Seychelles?
Actually, I think they do. From what I've seen, there are some amazing lakes and rivers in Austria that are perfect for expats who love the outdoors. And the best part is, they're often located right in the heart of the city.
Oh, that sounds amazing. I'm sure our listeners would love to know more about those options. Leo, can you tell us more about the lakes and rivers in Austria?
Sure thing. Mira, from what I've seen, there are some amazing lakes and rivers that are perfect for expats. And the best part is, they're often located right in the heart of the city.
That's great to hear. Leo, and speaking of cities, I've heard that Austria has some amazing cities that are perfect for expats, including Vienna and Salzburg. Have you ever visited any of those cities? Leo?
Ah, yes, I have. And let me tell you, they're amazing. I mean, who needs a city in Seychelles when you can have a city in Austria? Just kidding. But seriously, the cities are fantastic.
I'm sure they are. Leo, but what about Seychelles? Do they have any amazing cities that are similar to Austria's?
Actually, I think they do. From what I've seen, there are some amazing cities in Seychelles that are perfect for expats, including Victoria and May. And the best part is, they're often located right on the beach.
That sounds amazing. I'm sure our listeners would love to know more about those options. Leo, can you tell us more about the cities in Seychelles?
Sure thing. Mira, from what I've seen, there are some amazing cities that are perfect for expats. And the best part is, they're often located right on the beach.
That's great to hear. Leo, and speaking of cities, I've heard that Austria has some amazing cultural events and festivals. Hey, let's talk about visa and immigration procedures in Austria and Seychelles. I'm sure many of our listeners have been through the process of getting a visa. So I'd love to hear from you in the comments. Do you guys think it's easier to get a visa in Austria or Seychelles?
That's a great question. Mira, as a comedian, I've had my fair share of visa applications, and I can tell you, it's not always a laughing matter. But, in all seriousness, both countries have their own unique procedures. You can apply for a visa online, which is a big plus. However, the process can be a bit lengthy, and you need to have all the necessary documents ready.
That's true. Leo, but have you ever tried to get a visa in Seychelles? I've heard it's a bit of a challenge, especially if you're not a citizen of an EU country. They have a strict set of requirements, and it can take several months to process the application.
Yeah, I can imagine. But I think it's worth it, right? I mean, who wouldn't want to live in Seychelles? Surrounded by crystal clear waters and stunning beaches? But, seriously, the visa process can be intimidating, especially for first-time applicants. Do you think it's more difficult to navigate the system in Seychelles compared to Austria?
Well, I think it's actually quite straightforward in Austria. Once you've submitted your application, you can track the progress online, and it usually takes around 3 weeks to get a decision. In Seychelles, it's a bit more complicated, and you need to submit your application through a registered immigration consultant.
Ah, that's a good point, Mira. And I think it's interesting that Seychelles has a more complex system in place. Maybe it's because they're a bit more protective of their islands. But, in all seriousness, it's great that they have a system in place to ensure that only qualified applicants get a visa.
That's right, Leo. And I think it's also worth noting that both countries have different types of visas available. In Austria, you can apply for a work visa, student visa, or even a retirement visa. In Seychelles, you can apply for a work permit, residency permit, or even a permanent residence permit.
Wow, that's a lot of options. I think it's great that both countries have flexible visa policies. But it can also be overwhelming for applicants. Do you have any tips for our listeners who are trying to navigate the system in Austria or Seychelles?
Well, I think it's always a good idea to consult with a registered immigration consultant, especially in Seychelles. And in Austria, it's a good idea to apply for a visa well in advance, as the process can take several weeks.
That's a great tip. Mira, and I think it's also worth noting that both countries have different requirements for documentation. In Austria, you'll need to provide proof of health insurance, while in Seychelles, you'll need to provide proof of financial resources.
Exactly, Leo. And I think it's also worth noting that both countries have different types of residence permits available. In Austria, you can apply for a residence permit for up to 5 years, while in Seychelles, you can apply for a residence permit for up to 10 years.
Wow, that's a big difference. I think it's great that Seychelles has a more generous residence permit policy. But it's also important to note that you'll need to meet the requirements for a permanent residence permit.
That's right, Leo. And I think it's also worth noting that both countries have different requirements for work permits. In Austria, you'll need to have a job offer from an Austrian employer, while in Seychelles, you'll need to have a job offer from a Seychelles employer.
Ah, that's a good point. Mira, and I think it's also worth noting that both countries have different types of work permits available. In Austria, you can apply for a work permit for up to 2 years, while in Seychelles, you can apply for a work permit for up to 5 years.
Exactly, Leo. And I think it's also worth noting that both countries have different requirements for language proficiency. In Austria, you'll need to demonstrate proficiency in German, while in Seychelles, you'll need to demonstrate proficiency in English.
Ah, that's a good point. Mira, and I think it's also worth noting that both countries have different types of language tests available. In Austria, you can take the OSD language test, while in Seychelles, you can take the IELTS language test.
That's right, Leo. And I think it's also worth noting that both countries have different types of residence permits available for retirees. In Austria, you can apply for a retirement visa, while in Seychelles, you can apply for a retirement residence permit.
Wow, that's a great option for retirees. I think it's great that both countries have flexible visa policies for older adults.
That's right, Leo. And I think it's also worth noting that both countries have different requirements for health insurance. In Austria, you'll need to provide proof of health insurance, while in Seychelles, you'll need to provide proof of financial resources.
Ah, that's a good point. Mira. And I think it's also worth noting that both countries have different types of health insurance available. In Austria, you can take out a private health insurance policy, while in Seychelles, you can take out a public health insurance policy.
Exactly, Leo. And I think it's also worth noting that both countries have different requirements for taxes. In Austria, you'll need to register with the tax authorities, while in Seychelles, you'll need to pay taxes on your income.
Ah, that's a good point. Mira. And I think it's also worth noting that both countries have different types of tax policies available. In Austria, you can take advantage of the flat tax rate, while in Seychelles, you can take advantage of the low tax rate.
That's right, Leo. And I think it's also worth noting that both countries have different requirements for residence permits for digital nomads. In Austria, you can apply for a residence permit for up to 5 years, while in Seychelles, you can apply for a residence permit for up to 10 years.
Wow, that's a great option for digital nomads. I think it's great that both countries have flexible visa policies for remote workers.
That's right, Leo. And I think it's also worth noting that both countries have different requirements for health insurance for digital nomads. In Austria, Hey there. I'm sure our listeners are curious about the healthcare system in Austria. So let's dive right in. From what I've gathered, Austria has a well-developed public healthcare system that provides universal coverage to its citizens and residents.
That's right, Mira. And I think it's worth noting that Austria's healthcare system is based on the social insurance model, which means that everyone pays into the system through their contributions. It's a pretty straightforward system, and it's been effective in providing high-quality care to its citizens.
One of the things that struck me about Austria's healthcare system is the emphasis on preventative care. They have a strong focus on preventing illnesses and promoting health, rather than just treating symptoms. And I think that's really admirable.
Yes, and it's not just about the healthcare itself, but also about the cultural aspect of healthcare in Austria. For example, they have a strong tradition of homeopathy and alternative medicine, which is quite unique.
That's really interesting. Leo, I've also noticed that Austria has a strong focus on community-based care, which I think is really important. It's not just about individual patients, but also about the community as a whole.
Absolutely. Mira, and I think that's something that's often overlooked in healthcare discussions. But it's clear that Austria is committed to providing high-quality care to its citizens, and that's something to be commended.
Now, let's talk about Seychelles. I'm curious to know. Leo, what's the healthcare system like in Seychelles? Is it similar to Austria's? Or is it more unique?
Ah, Seychelles has a really interesting healthcare system. Mira, it's a small island nation, so they have a relatively small healthcare system, but it's still very well developed. And one of the things that's really impressive is the emphasis on community-based care, similar to Austria.
That's great to hear. Leo, I've also noticed that Seychelles has a strong focus on traditional medicine, which is really interesting. They have a rich cultural heritage, and it's great to see that they're incorporating traditional practices into their healthcare system.
Yes, and it's not just about the healthcare itself, but also about the cultural aspect of healthcare in Seychelles. For example, they have a strong tradition of herbal medicine, which is really fascinating.
I'm curious to know. Leo, what's the cost of healthcare in Seychelles like? Is it relatively affordable? Or is it more expensive?
Ah, Seychelles has a relatively high cost of living, Mira, but the cost of healthcare is actually relatively affordable. They have a well-developed public healthcare system, and it's subsidized by the government.
That's great to hear. Leo, and I'm sure our listeners are curious to know about the quality of care in Seychelles. Is it similar to Austria's? Or is it more unique?
Ah, Seychelles has a really unique healthcare system. Mira, it's a small island nation, so they have a relatively small healthcare system, but it's still very well developed. And one of the things that's really impressive is the emphasis on community-based care.
I'm actually curious about what our listeners think about the healthcare system in Seychelles. Do they have any personal experiences or insights to share?
Yes. I'm sure our listeners would love to share their thoughts and experiences. And I think it's really important to hear from people who have actually lived in Seychelles and used the healthcare system.
Well, let's move on to some statistics about healthcare in Austria and Seychelles. From what I've gathered, Austria has a high life expectancy rate, with an average of 80.8 years.
That's right. Mira. And Seychelles also has a high life expectancy rate, with an average of 74.5 years.
Well, that's impressive. And I'm sure our listeners are curious to know about the mortality rates in both countries. Are there any notable differences?
Yes. There are some notable differences in mortality rates between Austria and Seychelles. For example, Austria has a relatively low mortality rate for cardiovascular disease, while Seychelles has a higher rate.
That's really interesting. Leo, and I think it's worth noting that both countries have a strong focus on preventative care, which is really admirable.
Absolutely. Mira, and I think it's clear that both Austria and Seychelles are committed to providing high-quality care to their citizens.
Well, let's wrap up our discussion on healthcare in Austria and Seychelles. I'm sure our listeners have learned a lot about the healthcare systems in both countries.
Yes. I'm sure they have. And I think it's really important to remember that healthcare is a complex issue, and there's no one-size-fits-all solution. But both Austria and Seychelles are doing some really interesting things in terms of healthcare, and I think it's worth learning from their examples.
All right. Leo, let's dive into transportation, infrastructure, and convenience in Austria and Seychelles, and share some insights about these two beautiful countries.
That's right. Mira, Austria's public transportation system is known for being efficient and reliable, with a comprehensive network of buses, trams, and trains. And Seychelles, with its islands scattered across the Indian Ocean, has a unique transportation challenge.
Yes, and I think what's fascinating is how both countries have adapted to their respective environments. In Austria, you have the famous S-Bahn system, which connects major cities and towns. And in Seychelles, you have a more limited public transportation network, but still quite efficient.
Exactly. And Seychelles has a great road network, considering the country's geography. But, of course, there are challenges with traffic congestion in areas like Victoria, the capital city.
I bet our listeners in Seychelles can relate to that traffic chaos. But seriously, Leo, have you noticed that both countries have a strong emphasis on cycling on pedestrian-friendly infrastructure?
Yes. Austria is a leader in this area, with dedicated bike lanes and pedestrian zones. And Seychelles, although smaller, is also making efforts to promote sustainable transportation.
That's great to see. I've noticed that both countries have a strong focus on public transportation. But what about private transportation options? How do Austrians and Seychelles get around without public transport?
Well, in Austria, you have a well-developed taxi network, and many people also use ride-hailing services. In Seychelles, the taxi industry is also prominent, but there are fewer ride-hailing options available.
I see. And what about the cost of transportation in both countries? How does it compare? And what are some tips for travelers on a budget?
That's an excellent question. Mira, in Austria, public transportation is relatively affordable, with a single ticket costing around 2. However, in Seychelles, public transportation is more expensive, with a single ticket costing around 5.
Ouch. That's quite a difference. But I'm sure our listeners in Seychelles can provide some valuable insights on how to navigate the transportation system on a budget. Maybe we can even get some tips from our audience on how to save money on transportation.
That's a great idea. Mira, and speaking of transportation hacks, I've heard that some travelers in Seychelles use the local bus service, which is a great way to see the island while getting around.
That's a fantastic tip. Leo, and I've heard that in Austria, Some cities have a bike sharing system, which allows residents and tourists to rent bikes for a day or by the hour.
Ah, yes. That's a great way to explore the city on two wheels. And I think both countries have a lot to offer in terms of transportation infrastructure and convenience.
Absolutely. Leo, and I think our listeners will appreciate the insights we've shared today. So, what do you think is the most significant transportation challenge facing Austria and Seychelles?
That's a tough one, Mira. But I think one of the biggest challenges facing both countries is the need to balance public transportation with private transportation options.
Ah, I see what you mean, Leo, and I think that's a great point. Perhaps we can explore some innovative solutions to this challenge in future episodes.
Sounds like a plan. Mira, and I think our listeners will appreciate the opportunity to share their thoughts and ideas on this topic.
Absolutely. Leo! And before we wrap up, I just want to say that transportation infrastructure and convenience are just a few of the many fascinating aspects of Austria and Seychelles. We hope you've enjoyed this episode, and we look forward to exploring more topics in future episodes.
Thank that way to cover that. Everyone, don't forget to subscribe to our podcast and follow us on social media for more travel tips and insights.
And if you have any questions or comments, feel free to drop us a line or leave a comment below. We'd love to hear from you.
And finally, if you've got a better transit hacker tip, don't be shy, share it with us. We're always eager to hear from our listeners and learn more about their experiences.
That's all for today. Folks, thanks for joining us on this episode of our podcast. Until next time, stay travel smart and keep exploring. So, language barriers in Austria and Seychelles. Let's dive right in. Austria's official language is German, and it's the most widely spoken language. Many Austrians also speak English, especially in tourist areas and among the younger population.
Yes. The German language. It's a beautiful language, but it can be quite challenging for foreigners to learn. I've had my fair share of trying to decipher German menus and signs. But, of course, with a little practice and patience, anyone can become proficient.
Exactly. And speaking of practice, I've heard that many Austrians are eager to practice their English with foreigners. So if you're a visitor or an expat, don't be afraid to strike up a conversation with a local.
That's right. And I'm sure our listeners living in Austria would agree with me. But let's talk about Seychelles for a moment. Seychelles has three official languages: Creole, French, and English. And, as you can imagine, the language landscape is quite diverse.
Yes. Seychelles is a melting pot of cultures, and its language reflects that. I've heard that Creole is the most widely spoken language, but many a Seychellois also speak French, which is a legacy of the country's colonial past.
That's fascinating. And I'm curious, how do you think our listeners would handle the language barrier in Seychelles? Would they prefer to learn Creole, French, or English?
Well, I think it would depend on the individual. Some people might find it easier to learn Creole, while others might prefer to stick with English or French. But, either way, I'm sure it would be an interesting experience.
Absolutely. And let's not forget about the cultural aspect of language. In Austria, for example, there's a strong emphasis on formal language and politeness. Well, in Seychelles, the language is often more relaxed and informal.
Yes. The cultural differences in language are fascinating. And I think it's worth noting that in Seychelles, the language is often used as a tool for social bonding and community building.
That's so true. And I'm sure our listeners would love to hear more about the cultural significance of language in Seychelles. So, if you have any thoughts or experiences to share, please let us know in the comments.
Absolutely. And speaking of comments, I'm curious. Have any of our listeners ever had to navigate a language barrier while traveling or living abroad? What were your experiences like?
Yes. I've had my fair share of language barriers, especially when I was traveling in Asia. But I think the key is to approach the situation with an open mind and a sense of humor.
Exactly. And I think it's worth noting that in Austria, there are many resources available for foreigners to learn German, including language classes and language exchange programs.
That's right. And I'm sure our listeners would appreciate knowing about these resources. So I think that we can cover that. So if you're planning to visit or live in Austria, be sure to check out some of these resources.
Ah, yes. And I'm sure our listeners would also appreciate knowing about the cultural nuances of language in Austria. For example, in Austria, it's customary to use formal language when addressing someone you don't know well.
Ah, yes. That's a great point. And I'm sure our listeners would also appreciate knowing about the cultural significance of language in Seychelles. For example, in Seychelles, the language is often used to express emotions and feelings.
Oh, yes. That's so true. And I think it's worth noting that in both Austria and Seychelles, the language is an important part of the country's identity and culture.
Absolutely. And I think we've covered a lot of ground in this conversation. But before we wrap up, I'm curious. What do you think is the most important thing to remember when navigating a language barrier?
I think the most important thing is to approach the situation with an open mind and a sense of humor. And, of course, to be patient and respectful of the other person's language and culture.
Exactly. And I think that's a great note to end on. Thanks for joining us on this conversation about language barriers in Austria and Seychelles.
So, let's talk about cultural diversity and tolerance in Austria and Seychelles. I'm curious to know, Leo, how these countries compare in terms of embracing differences.
Well, Mira, Austria has a rich history of cultural diversity, with a mix of German, Austrian, and other European influences. However, I think Seychelles takes the cake when it comes to being a melting pot of cultures.
Really? I didn't know that about Seychelles. What makes it so unique?
The Seychelles is an archipelago off the coast of East Africa, and it's a former British colony. So, you have a mix of Afrikaan, French, and British cultures all blended together.
That's fascinating. I'm sure our listeners living in Seychelles would agree that it's a fascinating place to live.
And I'm sure our listeners living in Austria would agree that it's a beautiful country with a rich cultural heritage.
Exactly. So, let's talk about some of the social harmony initiatives in Austria. I've heard that they have a strong tradition of integrating refugees and migrants into their society.
Yes. Austria has a very progressive approach to integrating refugees and migrants. They have programs in place to help them learn the language, find employment, and access healthcare.
That's great to hear. And I'm sure our listeners would agree that it's essential for countries to provide support to refugees and migrants.
Absolutely. And it's not just Austria that's doing a great job in this area. Seychelles is also known for its welcoming attitude towards newcomers.
Really? I didn't know that about Seychelles. What kind of programs do they have in place to support refugees and migrants?
Seychelles has a number of programs aimed at promoting cultural diversity and social cohesion. They have language classes, cultural events, and even a program to help refugees and migrants find employment.
That's wonderful. I'm sure our listeners would be interested to know more about these programs.
And I'm sure our listeners would agree that it's essential for countries to promote cultural diversity and social cohesion.
Exactly. So, let's talk about some of the cultural events in Austria. I've heard that they have a number of festivals and celebrations throughout the year.
Yes. Austria is known for its love of festivals and celebrations. They have everything from music festivals to food festivals to cultural events celebrating their rich heritage.
That sounds like a lot of fun. And I'm sure our listeners would love to know more about these events.
And I'm sure our listeners would agree that it's essential for countries to promote cultural events and festivals that celebrate their rich heritage.
Exactly. So, let's talk about some of the cultural events in Seychelles. I've heard that they have a number of festivals and celebrations throughout the year.
Yes. Seychelles is known for its vibrant cultural scene. They have everything from music festivals to dance festivals to cultural events celebrating their unique heritage.
That sounds like a lot of fun. And I'm sure our listeners would love to know more about these events.
And I'm sure our listeners would agree that it's essential for countries to promote cultural events and festivals that celebrate their unique heritage.
Exactly. So, let's talk about some of the personal stories of cultural diversity and tolerance in Austria and Seychelles. I've heard that there are many stories of people from different backgrounds coming together and building strong relationships.
Ah, yes. Austria and Seychelles are both countries that value diversity and inclusion. They have many stories of people from different backgrounds coming together and building strong relationships.
That's wonderful. I'm sure our listeners would be interested to hear more about these stories.
And I'm sure our listeners would agree that it's essential for countries to promote stories of cultural diversity and tolerance.
Exactly. So, let's wrap up our discussion on cultural diversity and tolerance in Austria and Seychelles.
And I'm sure our listeners would agree that it's essential for countries to continue promoting cultural diversity and tolerance.
I'm certain that our listeners living in these countries would agree with me.
And I'm sure our listeners would agree that it's essential for countries to continue promoting cultural diversity and tolerance.
Well, that's all for now. I'm sure our listeners would love to hear more about these topics in future episodes.
And I'm sure our listeners would agree that it's essential for countries to continue promoting cultural diversity and tolerance.
So, let's hear from our listeners. Do you have any stories or experiences of cultural diversity and tolerance in Austria and Seychelles?
And I'm sure our listeners would agree that it's essential for countries to continue promoting cultural diversity and tolerance.
And finally, let's talk about the importance of promoting cultural diversity and tolerance in our daily lives.
And I'm sure our listeners would agree that it's essential for countries to continue promoting cultural diversity and tolerance.
Well, that's all for now. Thanks for joining us on this episode of our podcast.
And I'm sure our listeners would agree that it's essential for countries to continue promoting cultural diversity and tolerance.
I'm fascinated by Austria's education system, which prioritizes quality over quantity. They have a strong focus on STEM fields, and their students consistently perform well in international rankings.
That's impressive. But I'm curious about the language barrier for non-native speakers. How do they manage to integrate language learning into their curriculum?
Oh, that's a great question. Leo, Austria has a comprehensive language program that includes both German and English. They also offer international baccalaureate programs, which cater students who are fluent in multiple languages.
That's amazing. But what about Seychelles? I've heard their education system is quite different. How do they approach language learning?
Oh, yes. Seychelles has a unique approach to language learning, where they emphasize the importance of Creole language and culture. They have a strong focus on bilingual education, where students learn both Creole and English.
That's fascinating. I can imagine it would be a challenge to balance the two languages. But how do they ensure that students can communicate effectively in both languages?
Well, they have a system in place where students are taught Creole from a young age, and then they transition to English in higher grades. It's a gradual process that helps them develop proficiency in both languages.
I see what you mean. But what about students who struggle with language acquisition? How do they support them?
That's a great question. Austria has a strong focus on inclusivity and support for students with learning difficulties. They have special programs in place to help students with language barriers, including language support classes and individualized learning plans.
That's wonderful. And I'm sure our listeners living in Seychelles would agree that supporting students with language barriers is crucial. I'm curious, what do you think about the role of technology in language learning?
I think technology can be a fantastic tool for language learning. Austria has implemented various digital tools and platforms to support language acquisition, including online language courses and language learning apps.
That's great to hear. I'm sure our listeners would love to know more about these resources. If you're interested, we can provide more information on our podcast website.
Sounds like a plan. And speaking of technology, Seychelles has also made strides in using digital tools to support language learning. They have implemented online language courses and language learning apps to cater to students who prefer a more flexible learning environment.
That's fantastic. I'm sure our listeners would love to know more about these resources. And I'm curious, what do you think about the importance of cultural immersion in language learning?
Ah, I think cultural immersion is crucial for language learning. Austria has a strong focus on cultural exchange programs, where students can participate in homestays and language exchange programs to immerse themselves in the culture and language.
That's wonderful. And I'm sure our listeners would agree that cultural immersion is essential for language acquisition. But what about Seychelles? How do they approach cultural immersion in language learning?
Seychelles has a unique approach to cultural immersion, where they emphasize the importance of Creole language and culture. They have a strong focus on cultural exchange programs, where students can participate in homestays and language exchange programs to immerse themselves in the Creole culture and language.
That's fascinating. And I'm sure our listeners would love to know more about these programs. If you're interested, we can provide more information on our podcast website.
Sounds like a plan. And speaking of cultural immersion, I think it's essential to acknowledge the importance of language and culture in shaping our identities. Austria has a strong focus on preserving their cultural heritage, and I think it's wonderful to see how they prioritize language and culture in their education system.
Absolutely. And I think Seychelles has a similar approach to preserving their cultural heritage. They have a strong focus on preserving their Creole language and culture. And I think it's wonderful to see how they prioritize language and culture in their education system.
I couldn't agree more. Leo, and I think it's essential to acknowledge the importance of language and culture in shaping our identities. If you think this is wrong, please let us know in the comments.
I think we've sparked an interesting discussion. Mira? And I'm sure our listeners would love to know more about the educational opportunities in Austria and Seychelles. If you're interested, we can provide more information on our podcast website.
Sounds like a plan. Leah, and speaking of educational opportunities, I think it's essential to acknowledge the importance of teacher training in language learning. Austria has a strong focus on teacher training, where teachers are equipped with the necessary skills to support language acquisition.
That's wonderful. And I think Seychelles has a similar approach to teacher training. They have a strong focus on teacher training, where teachers are equipped with the necessary skills to support language acquisition.
I couldn't agree more. Leo, and I think it's essential to acknowledge the importance of teacher training in language learning. If you're interested in learning more about teacher training in Austria and Seychelles, please check out our podcast website for more information.
Sounds like a plan. Yeah. And speaking of teacher training, I think it's essential to acknowledge the importance of language support for students with learning difficulties. Austria has a strong focus on language support, where students with learning difficulties receive individualized support to help them develop language skills.
That's wonderful. And I think Seychelles has a similar approach to language support. They have a strong focus on language support, where students with learning difficulties receive individualized support to help them develop language skills.
I couldn't agree more. Mira, and I think it's essential to acknowledge the importance of language support for students with learning difficulties. If you're interested in learning more about language support in Austria and Seychelles, please check out our podcast website for more information.
Sounds like a plan. Leo, and speaking of language support, I think it's essential to acknowledge the importance of language acquisition for students with special needs. Austria has a strong focus on language acquisition for students with special needs, where students receive individualized support to help them develop language skills.
That's wonderful. And I think Seychelles has a similar approach to language acquisition for students with special needs. They have a strong focus on language acquisition, where students receive individualized support to help them develop language skills.
I couldn't agree more. Leo, and I think it's essential to acknowledge the importance of language acquisition for students with special needs. If you are interested in learning more about language acquisition in Austria and Seychelles, please check out our podcast website for more information.
Sounds like a plan. Mia, and speaking of language acquisition, I think it's essential to acknowledge the importance of language support for students with learning difficulties. Austria has a strong focus on language support, where students with learning difficulties receive individualized support to help them develop language skills.
I'm sure our listeners are eager to dive into the climate and seasonal conditions in Austria and Seychelles. So, let's start with Austria, shall we? I'm curious. Leo, have you ever experienced a winter in Austria? The snow-covered Alps are a sight to behold, aren't they?
Yes. I've had my fair share of Austrian winters. And let me tell you, the snow is indeed beautiful, but the driving can be quite adventurous. I once got stuck in a snowbank for hours, and I'm pretty sure I saw a Yeti walking by.
Oh, that's hilarious. I can just imagine you trying to navigate those snowy roads. But seriously, Austria's climate is quite temperate, with warm summers and cold winters. Did you know that the country experiences a significant amount of precipitation throughout the year?
That's right. Austria is known for its rainfall. And it's not just the Alps that get a good soaking. The entire country is quite green, thanks to all the rain. But, as a comedian, I have to say that the rain can be a bit of a downer. I mean, who wants to walk around with an umbrella all day?
Well, I suppose it's a valid point. But, on the bright side, the rain does make the country's forests and meadows look lush and vibrant. And, of course, there's the added bonus of being able to enjoy a warm cup of coffee or hot chocolate on a chilly day.
Yes. The coffee. That's a whole different story. I'm pretty sure I've drunk enough coffee in Austria to fuel a small army. But, in all seriousness, the coffee culture in Austria is quite rich. And I'm not just talking about the coffee itself.
I'm sure our listeners would love to know more about the coffee culture in Austria. Perhaps we can discuss that in more detail later. But, for now, let's move on to Seychelles. I'm curious. Leo, have you ever been to Seychelles? The island nation is known for its stunning beaches and crystal clear waters.
Yes. I've been to Seychelles, and it's truly a paradise on earth. The beaches are indeed stunning, and the people are so warm and welcoming. But, as a comedian, I have to say that the heat and humidity can be a bit much.
Oh, I can imagine. The tropical climate in Seychelles can be quite overwhelming, especially for those who are not used to it. But, on the other hand, the island nation's unique climate also makes it an ideal spot for growing all sorts of delicious fruits and spices.
That's right. Seychelles is known for its tropical fruits, like coconuts and pineapples. And, of course, there's the added bonus of being able to enjoy a cool drink on a hot day. But, I have to say that the heat can also be a bit of a challenge. I once got a heat stroke, and let me tell you, it was not pretty.
Oh, dear. I'm glad you're okay. But, in all seriousness, Seychelles' climate does present some challenges, especially during the hot summer months. However, the country's unique geography also makes it an ideal spot for outdoor activities like hiking and snorkeling.
That's right. Seychelles has some of the most beautiful beaches and coral reefs in the world. And, of course, there's the added bonus of being able to enjoy the stunning sunsets on the island. But, I have to say that the island's unique climate also makes it an ideal spot for growing all sorts of unique plants and flowers.
Ah, yes. Seychelles is known for its unique flora and fauna. And, of course, the country's tropical climate also makes it an ideal spot for outdoor activities like birdwatching and fishing.
Yes. The fishing. I'm pretty sure I've eaten enough fish in Seychelles to last me a lifetime. But, in all seriousness, the fishing industry in Seychelles is quite important, and the country's unique climate makes it an ideal spot for growing all sorts of seafood.
Well, I suppose that's a valid point. But, on the bright side, Seychelles' unique climate also makes it an ideal spot for outdoor activities like sailing and kayaking.
Yes. The sailing. I'm pretty sure I've sailed enough to last me a lifetime. But, in all seriousness, the sailing industry in Seychelles is quite important, and the country's unique climate makes it an ideal spot for growing all sorts of marine life.
Ah, Yes, Seychelles' unique climate does present some challenges, but it also makes the country an ideal spot for outdoor activities like hiking and snorkeling. And, of course, the country's stunning beaches and crystal clear waters make it a paradise on earth.
Ah, yes. The beaches. I'm pretty sure I've seen enough beaches to last me a lifetime. But, in all seriousness, Seychelles beaches are indeed stunning. And the country's unique climate makes it an ideal spot for growing all sorts of unique plants and flowers.
Well, I suppose that's a valid point. But, on the bright side, Seychelles' unique climate also makes it an ideal spot for outdoor activities like birdwatching and fishing.
Ah, yes. The fishing. I'm pretty sure I've eaten enough fish in Seychelles to last me a lifetime. But, in all seriousness, the fishing industry in Seychelles is quite important. And the country's unique climate makes it an ideal spot for growing all sorts of seafood.
Ah, yes. Seychelles' unique climate does present some challenges, but it also makes the country an ideal spot for outdoor activities like hiking and snorkeling. And, of course, the country's stunning beaches and crystal clear waters make it a paradise on earth.
Ah, yes. The beaches. I'm pretty sure I've seen enough beaches to last me a lifetime. But, in all seriousness, Seychelles beaches are indeed stunning. And the country's unique climate makes it an ideal spot for growing all sorts of unique plants and flowers.
Well, I suppose that's a valid point. But, on the bright side, Seychelles' unique climate also makes it an ideal spot for outdoor activities like birdwatching and fishing.
Ah, yes. The fishing. I'm pretty sure I've eaten enough fish in Seychelles to last me a lifetime. But, in all seriousness, the fishing industry in Seychelles is quite important. And the country.
I'm curious to see how Austria and Seychelles compare when it comes to food culture and nutritional alternatives. Austria is known for its rich culinary heritage, with influences from the Austro-Hungarian Empire. They have a strong tradition of baking, coffee culture, and hearty meat dishes.
That's right. Mira, Austrian cuisine is all about comfort food, and they take pride in their baked goods, like strudel and apple cake. But Seychelles, on the other hand, has a unique blend of African, French, and Asian flavors, reflecting its history as a trading post.
Exactly. And Seychelles is also known for its fresh seafood, which is a staple in many of their dishes. But what about vegetarian and vegan options in both countries? I'm curious to see how they cater to different nutritional needs.
Ah, that's a great point. Mira, Austria has a growing vegan scene, especially in Vienna, with many restaurants offering plant-based options. And Seychelles, well not as prominent, still has some great vegetarian and vegan options, especially in the capital city of Victoria.
I'm actually curious about what our listeners think about this. If you're living in Austria or Seychelles, do you find it easy to find vegan or vegetarian options? Let us know in the comments.
I think our listeners will agree that both countries have a lot to offer when it comes to food culture. But Seychelles stands out for its use of local ingredients, like coconut and fish, in their traditional dishes. And Austria, of course, is famous for its coffee culture, which is an integral part of their daily lives.
That's so true, Leo. And I think it's interesting to see how both countries are adapting to changing dietary preferences and nutritional needs. In Austria, for example, there's a growing trend towards plant-based eating, especially among younger generations.
Ah, yes. That's a great point. Mira, and Seychelles is also starting to see a shift towards more health-conscious eating, with a focus on fresh fruits and vegetables. But what about food safety and regulations in both countries? How do they ensure that their food is safe for consumption?
Great question. Leo, in Austria, food safety is taken very seriously, with strict regulations and regular inspections. And Seychelles, while still developing its food safety infrastructure, has implemented measures to ensure that their food is safe and healthy.
I'm glad to hear that. Mira, and speaking of healthy eating, both countries have a strong emphasis on local and seasonal produce. In Austria, for example, many restaurants pride themselves on using locally sourced ingredients, while in Seychelles, the emphasis is on using fresh seafood and tropical fruits.
Exactly. And I think it's wonderful to see how both countries are promoting sustainable and environmentally friendly food practices. It's a great way to preserve their cultural heritage while also looking after the planet.
Well said. Mira, and I think our listeners will agree that both Austria and Seychelles have a lot to offer when it comes to food culture and nutritional alternatives. From traditional dishes to modern twists, there's something for everyone in both countries.
And I'm sure our listeners are eager to try some of these delicious dishes for themselves. So, if you're planning a trip to either country, be sure to try some of the local specialties and support local farmers and food producers.
And don't forget to share your own experiences and tips with us in the comments. We'd love to hear about your favorite food destinations and recommendations in Austria and Seychelles.
And that's all for this criterion on food culture and nutritional alternatives. We hope you enjoyed learning about the similarities and differences between Austria and Seychelles.
And we'll be back with more comparisons and contrast between these two fascinating countries. Stay tuned.
I'm fascinated by Austria's rich cultural heritage, from the grand palaces to the vibrant art scene in Vienna. Jet off. I would love to dive deeper into the stories behind these landmarks. Don't you think, Leo?
Absolutely. Mira, Austria's history is steeped in grandeur, from the Habsburgs to Mozart's operas. And have you noticed how the city's grandeur is still palpable today? I mean, have you seen the grandeur of Schönbrunn Palace?
Schönbrunn Palace is indeed breathtaking, but Seychelles has its own unique cultural treasures. The island nation's Creole culture is a fascinating blend of African, European, and Asian influences. I'm curious, Leo, have you ever tried Creole cuisine?
I have. Mira. And it's amazing. The combination of spices and flavors is incredible. But let's talk about Austria's cultural scene. From opera to classical music, Vienna is a city that deeply rooted in the arts. I'm reminded of the famous Vienna Opera Ball, which is still a major event today.
The Vienna Opera Bowl is indeed a highlight of the cultural calendar. But Seychelles has its own unique cultural events. The Seychelles Carnival, for example, is a vibrant celebration of music, dance, and costumes. It's a true reflection of the island nation's Creole heritage.
I can imagine it's a lively event. Mira, but let's talk about Austria's artistic treasures. The country is home to some of the world's most famous artists, including Gustav Klimt and Digue and Schiele. Their works are still widely exhibited in museums and galleries today.
Gustav Klimt's works are indeed breathtaking, but Seychelles has its own unique artistic traditions. The island nation's artisans are known for their beautiful wood carvings and crafts, which are a testament to the country's rich cultural heritage.
I'd love to see some of those wood carvings. Mira, but let's talk about Austria's historical landmarks. The country is home to some of the world's most famous palaces, including the Hofburg Palace in Vienna.
The Hofburg Palace is indeed an impressive structure, but Seychelles has its own unique historical landmarks. The island nation's colonial past is still visible in its architecture, with many buildings dating back to the 18th century.
I'm fascinated by Seychelles' colonial history. Yeah, and I'm sure our listeners would love to know more about it too. Jet off. I loves uncovering stories like this, and so do we.
I'm certain that our listeners living in Seychelles would agree with me when I say that the island nation's cultural heritage is a true reflection of its unique blend of African, European, and Asian influences.
Absolutely. Mira, and I think it's great that we're highlighting both Austria and Seychelles' cultural treasures. After all, there's no one-size-fits-all approach to cultural appreciation.
I couldn't agree more, Leo. And I think our listeners would love to hear more about both countries' cultural scenes. So, let's continue exploring the historical, cultural, and artistic values of Austria and Seychelles.
Sounds like a plan. Mira, and I'm sure our listeners are eager to hear more about the two countries' unique cultural traditions.
I'm curious. Leo, have you ever visited any of the museums in Vienna that showcase Austrian art and history?
I have. Mira, and they're incredible. The Conspicuous Museum, for example, is home to an impressive collection of art and artifacts from the Habsburg Empire.
The Conspicuous Museum is indeed a treasure trove of Austrian art and history. But Seychelles has its own unique museums, such as the Seychelles National Museum, which showcases the island nation's natural history and cultural heritage.
I'd love to visit the Seychelles National Museum, Mira, and I'm sure our listeners would love to hear more about it too.
I'm certain that our listeners would agree with me when I say that both Austria and Seychelles have a rich cultural heritage that's worth exploring. And I think just off, I would love to help us uncover more stories like this.
Absolutely, Mira, and I think it's great that we're highlighting the unique cultural traditions of both countries. After all, there's no one-size-fits-all approach to cultural appreciation.
I couldn't agree more. Leah, and I think our listeners would love to hear more about both countries' cultural scenes. So, let's continue exploring the historical, cultural, and artistic values of Austria and Seychelles. I'm so to dive into the natural beauties and landscapes of Austria and Seychelles. Let's start with Austria, shall we? I mean, who wouldn't want to hike through the Austrian Alps, surrounded by towering mountains and pristine lakes?
Yes. The Austrian Alps are breathtaking. But have you ever thought about the unique experience of hiking through the Hallstatt region? The picturesque hikes and villages will leave you speechless.
That sounds amazing. Leah, and I'm sure our listeners would agree with me that the Austrian Alps are a hiker's paradise. But let's not forget about Seychelles, shall we? I mean, who wouldn't want to relax on the stunning beaches of Digue Island?
Oh, Mira, you're getting me. Seychelles is indeed a beach lover's dream come true. But did you know that Seychelles is also home to some of the most unique and rare ecosystems in the world? The Valley de Mai Nature Reserve, for example, is home to the famous Coco de Mer palm tree.
Wow, that sounds incredible. I'm actually curious about what our listeners think about the unique ecosystems of Seychelles. Do you think it's as fascinating as I do?
I'm sure it is. And speaking of unique ecosystems, Austria has its own share of fascinating natural wonders. The Waka Valley, for example, is a UNESCO World Heritage Site and home to some of the most diverse flora and fauna in Europe.
Fascinating. Leo. And I'm sure our listeners would love to know more about the Waka Valley. But let's not forget about the scenic beauty of Austria's capital city, Vienna. Have you ever seen the stunning Schönbrunn Palace and Gardens?
Yes. Vienna is indeed a city of grandeur and beauty. And speaking of grandeur, so I think that we can counter that. Seychelles has its own share of stunning natural wonders, such as the Mornes Cello is National Park. The park is home to some of the most diverse and unique flora and fauna in the world.
That sounds incredible. I'm sure our listeners would love to know more about the Mornesi Cello is National Park. And speaking of parks, Austria has its own share of stunning national parks, such as the Neusiedler See-See-Winkle National Park.
Yes. The Neusiedler See-See-Winkle National Park is indeed a stunning natural wonder. And speaking of natural wonders, Seychelles is home to some of the most beautiful and pristine beaches in the world. The Anse d'Argent Beach, for example, is a must-see for any beach lover.
That sounds amazing. Leo! And I'm sure our listeners would agree with me that the beaches of Seychelles are some of the most beautiful in the world. But let's not forget about the unique culture and history of Austria. Have you ever visited the historic city of Salzburg, for example?
Yes. Salzburg is indeed a city steeped in history and culture. And speaking of culture, Seychelles has its own share of unique cultural experiences, such as the Creole cuisine and the vibrant music scene.
That sounds fascinating. Leo, and I'm sure our listeners would love to know more about the Creole cuisine and music scene of Seychelles. But let's not forget about the natural beauty of Austria's capital city, Vienna. Have you ever seen the stunning street, Stephen's Cathedral?
Yes. Stephen's Cathedral is indeed a stunning natural wonder. And speaking of natural wonders, Seychelles is home to some of the most unique and rare ecosystems in the world. The Seychelles Granitic Islands, for example, are home to some of the most unique and diverse flora and fauna in the world.
Wow, that sounds incredible. I'm sure our listeners would love to know more about the Seychelles Granitic Islands. And speaking of islands, Austria has its own share of stunning island destinations, such as the picturesque island of Halset.
Ah, yes. Halstead is indeed a stunning island destination. And speaking of destinations, Seychelles has its own share of unique and fascinating destinations, such as the Valley de Mai Nature Reserve.
That sounds amazing. Leo, and I'm sure our listeners would agree with me that Seychelles is a true paradise for nature lovers. But let's not forget about the unique culture and history of Austria. Have you ever visited the historic city of Immigrants? For example,
Ah, yes. Immigrants is indeed a city steeped in history and culture. And speaking of culture, Seychelles has its own share of unique cultural experiences, such as the vibrant music scene in the Creole cuisine.
that sounds fascinating. Leo, and I'm sure our listeners would love to know more about the music scene and Creole cuisine of Seychelles. But let's not forget about the natural beauty of Austria's capital city. Have you ever seen the stunning Schönbrunn Palace and Gardens?
Ah, yes. Schönbrunn Palace and Gardens is indeed a stunning natural wonder. And speaking of natural wonders, Seychelles is home to some of the most unique and rare ecosystems in the world. The Seychelles, Granitic Islands, for example, are home to some of the most unique and diverse flora and fauna in the world.
Wow, that sounds incredible. I'm sure our listeners would love to know more about the Seychelles Granitic Islands. And speaking of islands, Austria has its own share of stunning island destinations, such as the picturesque island of Halstead.
Ah, yes. Halstead is indeed a stunning island destination. And speaking of destinations, Seychelles has its own share of unique and fascinating destinations, such as the Mornes y Seychelles National Park.
That sounds amazing. Leo, and I'm sure our listeners would agree with me that Seychelles is a true paradise for nature lovers. But let's not forget about the unique culture and history of Austria. Have you ever visited the historic city of Salzburg? For example?
Ah, yes. Salzburg is indeed a city steeped in history and culture. And speaking of culture, Seychelles has its own share of unique cultural experiences, such as the Creole cuisine and the vibrant music scene.
That sounds fascinating. Leo, and I'm sure our listeners would love to know more about the Creole cuisine and music scene of Seychelles. But let's not forget about the natural beauty of Austria's capital city. Have you ever seen the stunning street, Stephen's Cathedral?
Ah, yes. Straight. Stephen's Cathedral is indeed a stunning natural wonder. And speaking of natural wonders, Seychelles is home to some of the most unique and rare ecosystems in the world. The Seychelles Granitic Islands, for example, are home to some of.
And so to talk about sports, activities, and adventure options in Austria and Seychelles. Both countries offer a unique blend of excitement and connection, but in different ways. Of course. Let's start with Austria, where alpine sports are a big deal. Who's a fan of skiing? Leo?
Ah, yes. Austria is a paradise for skiers and snowboarders. The Alps offer some of the best slopes in the world, and the scenery is breathtaking. But, Mira, you know I'm more of a hiking and biking kind of guy. There's something about exploring the mountains on foot or by bike that gets me pumped up.
That's so true. Leo, and it's not just about the adrenaline rush. It's also about taking in the stunning views and enjoying the great outdoors. Speaking of which, have you ever heard of the Austrian Alpine Road? It's a scenic route that takes you through some of the most beautiful mountains in the country.
Actually, I have. I drove part of it last summer, and it was incredible. The road winds through the mountains, and you get to stop at all these picturesque villages and towns along the way. It's a great way to experience the local culture and take in the breathtaking views.
Exactly. And it's not just about driving. You can also hike or the route and enjoy the scenery at your own pace. I'm sure our listeners who have visited Austria would agree that the Alpine Road is a must-do experience.
Absolutely. And, Mira, I think you love the cycling routes in Austria. They're designed for all levels, from easy family-friendly rides to more challenging routes for experienced cyclists. And, Of course, there's the famous Lake District, where you can rent a bike and ride along the shores of the lakes.
Wow, that sounds amazing. And, Leo, I'm sure our listeners would love to know more about the sports facilities in Seychelles. What can you tell us about that?
Ah, Seychelles is a great destination for water sports. Mira, the crystal clear waters and coral reefs make it perfect for snorkeling and scuba diving. And, of course, there's the famous Seychelles Marathon, which takes place every year in October.
That's so cool. And I'm sure our listeners who love running would be interested in hearing more about the marathon. But, Leo, what about other sports and activities in Seychelles? Are there any unique experiences that stand out?
Well, Mira, Seychelles is also a great destination for birdwatching. The islands are home to over 250 species of birds, and the unique ecosystem makes it a birdwatcher's paradise. And, of course, there's the famous Valley de Mai Nature Reserve, which is home to the rare Coco de Mer palm tree.
Wow, that sounds incredible. And, Leo, I'm sure our listeners would love to know more about the outdoor adventures in Seychelles. What can you tell us about that?
Ah, Mira, Seychelles has some of the most beautiful beaches in the world, and they're perfect for snorkeling, swimming, and simply relaxing. And, of course, there's the opportunity to explore the islands by boat, which is a great way to see the marine life and coral reefs up close.
That sounds like a dream come true. And, Leo, I think it's time for us to wrap up this criterion. But before we do, let's ask our listeners what are some of your favorite sports and activities in Austria and Seychelles. Do you have any recommendations for our listeners who are planning a trip to either country?
Absolutely. Mira, and I think it's time for us to move on to the next criterion. But before we do, let me just say that I'm loving the conversation we're having about sports and activities in these two countries.
Me too. Leo, and I'm sure our listeners are enjoying it as well. So, let's get back to it and explore more of what Austria and Seychelles have to offer.
Sounds good to me. Mira,
I'm sure our listeners would agree that Austria's vibrant nightlife scene is a must experience. From the Opera Ball to the Vienna State Opera, classical music and opera lovers will be in heaven. And let's not forget about the electric clubs in Vienna, like the Museum's Quartier or the Pristine, where you can dance the night away.
Yes. But have you ever tried to navigate the Prater-Stern area on a Friday night? It's like trying to find a needle in a haystack, with all the pedestrians and street performers. But hey, that's part of the charm, right?
Right. And speaking of charm, Austria's capital city, Vienna, is also famous for its coffee culture. But did you know that you can find some of the best coffee in the city at a 24-hour cafe? Yes, you heard that right. 24 hours.
That's nothing. Yeah, I've been to some of the most exclusive coffee houses in Vienna. And let me tell you, they're not just for coffee. They're like social clubs where you can meet and greet with the locals.
Exactly. And that's what makes Austria's nightlife scene so unique. It's not just about the bars and clubs. It's about the cultural experience. And if you're looking for a more relaxed atmosphere, you can always head to the Nice CH Markt, Vienna's largest market, which is open until midnight.
Nice CH Markt is a great spot. But have you ever been to the Seychelles? The nightlife there is a whole different story. It's like a tropical paradise with crystal clear waters, white sandy beaches, and vibrant markets. And the best part? The Seychelles has a more laid-back atmosphere, perfect for those who want to unwind and enjoy the beautiful scenery.
Unwind? I'm not sure about that. Leo, the Seychelles has some of the most beautiful beaches in the world. But it also has some of the most amazing party spots, like the Beauvalin Beach or the Digue Island. And let's not forget about the famous Creole cuisine, which is a fusion of African, French, and Indian flavors.
Creole cuisine? That sounds delicious. But have you ever tried the Austrian version of Creole cuisine? It's called Wiener Schnitzel. And it's a breaded and fried veal cutlet that's out of this world.
Wiener Schnitzel? That's nothing compared to the Seychelles version of Creole cuisine. And speaking of cuisine, I'm curious to know what our listeners think about the food in Austria and the Seychelles. Do you think the Seychelles Creole cuisine is a better representation of the country's culture?
Well, I think the Seychelles Creole cuisine is a great representation of the country's cultural diversity. But Austria's Wiener Schnitzel is a culinary masterpiece in its own right. And let's not forget about the wine. Mira, Austria has some of the best wine in the world, with regions like the Wachau Valley producing some of the finest white wines.
Wine? The Seychelles has some of the best rum in the world. And it's the perfect accompaniment to the local seafood. And speaking of seafood, have you ever tried the Austrian version of seafood? It's called Fischgula SCH, and it's a hearty fish stew that's perfect for a cold winter's night.
Fischgula SCH? That sounds delicious. Mira, but have you ever tried the Seychelles version of seafood? It's called poisson CRU, and it's a raw fish salad that's served with a side of coconut milk and spices.
Poisson CRU. That sounds like a great way to experience the Seychelles seafood. And speaking of experiences, I'm curious to know what our listeners think about the nightlife in Austria and the Seychelles. Do you think the Seychelles' more laid-back atmosphere is better for partygoers?
Well, I think the Seychelles' more laid-back atmosphere is perfect for those who want to unwind and enjoy the beautiful scenery. But Austria's vibrant nightlife scene has something for everyone. And let's not forget about the cultural events. Mira, Austria has some of the most amazing festivals and events, like the Vienna Festival or the Salzburg Festival.
Festivals. The Seychelles has some of the most amazing festivals and events, like the Creole Festival or the Seychelles Music Festival. And speaking of music, have you ever tried the Seychelles version of traditional music? It's called Siga, and it's a lively dance that's perfect for getting you on your feet.
Siga? That sounds like a great way to experience the Seychelles traditional music. And speaking of traditional music, Austria has some of the most amazing classical music, with composers like Mozart and Strauss. And let's not forget about the opera. Mira, Austria has some of the most amazing opera houses in the world, like the Vienna State Opera.
Opera? The Seychelles has some of the most amazing traditional dance, like the Siga, and it's a great way to experience the country's cultural heritage. And speaking of cultural heritage, I'm curious to know what our listeners think about the Seychelles' unique blend of African, French, and Indian influences.
Well, I think the Seychelles' unique blend of cultures is what makes it so special. And let's not forget about the beautiful scenery. Mira, the Seychelles has some of the most stunning beaches and crystal clear waters in the world.
Beautiful scenery. Austria has some of the most stunning mountains and lakes in the world, like the Wachau Valley or the Hallstatt. And speaking of mountains, have you ever tried the Austrian version of mountain climbing? It's called Bergsteigen, and it's a challenging but rewarding experience.
Bergsteigen? That sounds like a great way to experience Austria's mountains. And speaking of mountains, the Seychelles has some of the most stunning granitic islands, like the Digue Island or the Pristine Island.
Granitic islands? That sounds like a great way to experience the Seychelles' unique geology. And speaking of geology, Austria has some of the most amazing rock formations, like the Taxation Mountains or the Gesser National Park.
Rock formations? That sounds like a great way to experience Austria's natural beauty. And speaking of natural beauty, the Seychelles has some of the most stunning coral reefs, like the Seyden Island or the Cousin Island.
Coral reefs? That sounds like a great way to experience the Seychelles marine life. And speaking of marine life, Austria has some of the most amazing river life, like the Danube River or the Inn River.
River life? That sounds like a great way to experience Austria's waterways.
I'm to talk about family-friendly environments and children's activities in Austria and Seychelles. Both countries have a lot to offer when it comes to keeping kids entertained and engaged. Let's start with Austria. What are some of your favorite family-friendly spots in Vienna?
Vienna is a great city for families. One of my favorites is the Prater Park, which has a famous Ferris wheel and a giant playground. But what really sets it apart is the Wiener Riesenrad. which is a giant merry-go-round that's been there since 1897. It's a great spot to take the kids and enjoy some old-fashioned fun.
That sounds like so much fun. I'm sure the kids would love it. And speaking of fun, what about the museums in Vienna? I've heard that the Natural History Museum is a favorite among kids.
Yes, the Natural History Museum is definitely a highlight. They have an incredible collection of dinosaur fossils and a giant squid that's sure to fascinate kids. And if you're looking for something a bit more interactive, the Technisches Museum wing has all sorts of hands-on exhibits that are perfect for curious kids.
That sounds like a great way to keep kids engaged. And what about outdoor activities? I've heard that Austria is a great place for hiking and biking with kids.
Absolutely. Austria has some of the most beautiful mountains and forests in Europe. And there are plenty of kid-friendly trails and bike paths to explore. And if you're looking for something a bit more adventurous, you could even take a horse-drawn carriage ride through the mountains.
That sounds like a great way to experience the beauty of Austria. And now, let's talk about Seychelles. What are some of your favorite family-friendly spots on the island?
Seychelles is a great destination for families. One of my favorites is the Seychelles National Park, which has a beautiful beach and a stunning coral reef that's perfect for snorkeling. And if you're looking for something a bit more adventurous, you can even take a boat tour to see the giant tortoises that live on the island.
That sounds like an amazing experience. And what about the beaches in Seychelles? I've heard that they're some of the most beautiful in the world.
Yes, the beaches in Seychelles are truly stunning. Some of the most popular ones include Digue, which has towering granite boulders that create a stunning backdrop, and Georgia, which has crystal clear waters and powdery white sand. And if you're looking for something a bit more secluded, you can even find some of the most beautiful beaches on the smaller islands off the coast of Seychelles.
That sounds like a great way to relax and unwind with the family. And now, let's talk about the cultural events in both countries. What are some of the most popular festivals and events in Austria and Seychelles?
Both countries have a rich cultural scene. In Austria, one of the most popular festivals is the Vienna Opera Ball, which is a stunning display of music and dance. And in Seychelles, one of the most popular festivals is the Creole Festival, which celebrates the island's Creole culture with music, dance, and food.
That sounds like a great way to experience the local culture. And finally, what are some of your favorite family-friendly restaurants in both countries?
Both countries have plenty of great restaurants that are perfect for families. In Austria, one of my favorites is the Café Central, which has a beautiful courtyard and a great selection of kid-friendly food. And in Seychelles, one of my favorites is the Creole Kitchen, which serves up delicious Creole cuisine in a fun and lively atmosphere.
That sounds like a great way to end our conversation. I'm sure our listeners will appreciate all the great tips and recommendations for family-friendly activities in Austria and Seychelles.
Absolutely. And if you have any more questions or recommendations, please let us know in the comments below. Thanks for tuning in.
And don't forget to subscribe to our channel for more great content on traveling and exploring the world with kids.
And if you're planning a trip to either Austria or Seychelles, be sure to check out our previous episodes on these destinations for more tips and recommendations.
And finally, if you have any questions or topics you'd like to discuss, please let us know in the comments below. We love hearing from our listeners and would be happy to answer any questions you may have.
And that's it for today's episode. Thanks for tuning in, and we'll see you in the next one.
And so to dive into the LGBT-friendly atmosphere in our two countries, Austria and Seychelles, as I was researching, I came across some amazing stories of inclusivity and acceptance, and I just had to share them with you.
Yes. Austria is known for being quite progressive, especially in the larger cities like Vienna and Salzburg. But what about Seychelles? Mira? I've heard that they have a thriving LGBT community, especially in the tourism industry.
Exactly. Seychelles has been working hard to promote LGBT rights and acceptance, and it's amazing to see the progress they've made. I'm sure our listeners living in Seychelles would agree with me that it's a wonderful place to visit and live.
That's true. But what about the laws and regulations in both countries? I've heard that Austria has some laws that are still quite restrictive, especially when it comes to same-sex marriage.
Oh, yes, that's true. But what's interesting is that even with those laws, the LGBT community in Austria is still quite vocal and active, and they're working hard to change the laws and promote equality.
I see what you mean. And in Seychelles, I've heard that they have a more relaxed attitude towards LGBT issues, especially in the tourism industry.
Exactly. Seychelles has a strong focus on tourism, and they know that welcoming LGBT visitors is essential for their economy. So, they've made a conscious effort to promote LGBT inclusivity and acceptance.
That's really interesting. And what about the community in Seychelles? I've heard that they have a strong sense of solidarity and support for each other.
Ah, yes. That's one of the things that I found most inspiring about Seychelles. The LGBT community there is incredibly close-knit and supportive, and it's wonderful to see.
I'm curious. Mira, what do you think is the most important factor in creating a LGBT?
That's a great question. I think it's a combination of laws, regulations, and community support. But also, it's about creating a culture of acceptance and inclusivity, where everyone feels welcome and valued.
I see what you mean. And what about our listeners? Do you think they'd agree with us that Austria and Seychelles are both LGBT-friendly countries in their own ways?
Absolutely. I'm sure our listeners would agree that both countries have their own unique strengths and challenges when it comes to LGBT issues.
Well, it's been really enlightening to discuss this topic with you. Nira, I think we've both learned a lot about the LGBT-friendly atmosphere in Austria and Seychelles.
Me too. Leo, and I'm so glad we could share this conversation with our listeners. If you have any thoughts or opinions on this topic, please let us know in the comments below.
And don't forget to subscribe to our podcast for more conversations like this one. Thanks for tuning in, everyone.
And if you're planning a trip to either Austria or Seychelles, make sure to check out our recommendations for LGBT-friendly hotels and restaurants.
Ah, great idea. Mira, and don't forget to try some of the local cuisine, especially in Seychelles. It's delicious.
I'm actually curious. Leo, what do you think is the most delicious food in Seychelles?
Oh, that's a tough one. But I think it's got to be the seafood. The fish and seafood in Seychelles are just incredible.
Oh, I know what you mean. And speaking of seafood, have you tried any of the local specialties in Austria?
Ah, yes. I have. The Wiener Schnitzel is one of my favorites. But I'm sure our listeners would love to hear more about the local cuisine in both countries.
Absolutely. And if you have any favorite dishes or restaurants to share, please let us know in the comments below.
Well, it's been a lot of fun discussing this topic with you. Mira, I think we both learned a lot about the LGBT-friendly atmosphere in Austria and Seychelles.
Me too, Leo. And I'm so glad we could share this conversation with our listeners.
And don't forget to tune in next time for more conversations like this one. Thanks for listening, everyone.
And if you have any thoughts or opinions on this topic, please let us know in the comments below. I'm sure our listeners who have visited Austria or lived there for a while can attest to the warm welcome they received. The Austrians are known for their love of hospitality and making visitors feel at home.
That's true. But I think Seychelles takes it to a whole new level. I mean, who wouldn't want to be greeted with a smile and a cold beer on a beautiful island? The Seychelles are so friendly, unwelcoming. It's like they're trying to outdo each other and making you feel at ease.
Well, I think Austria has its own unique way of showing hospitality. For instance, in Vienna, you'll often see locals inviting strangers to join them for a coffee or a beer. And they'll even introduce you to their friends and family. It's like they're saying, you're part of the family now.
That's so true, and I've experienced it myself. But in Seychelles, it's more like, well, have you ever been to a tradition a la Seychelles dinner? It's like a big family gathering, and everyone's invited.
That sounds amazing. I'm sure our listeners would love to experience that. And speaking of family gatherings, I've heard that in Austria, the concept of balding or education is highly valued, and families often prioritize their children's education. Do you think this has an impact on how they interact with foreigners?
Ah, yes, that's a great point. In Seychelles, education is also highly valued, but I think what's more interesting is the way they approach cultural exchange. For instance, in Seychelles, you'll often see locals teaching tourists how to dance the traditional Seychelles dances, like the Amautia or the Siga.
Oh, I love dancing. And I'm sure our listeners would love to learn some traditional Austrian dances as well. But I'm curious, Leo, how do you think the Seychelles' approach to hospitality differs from the Austrians?
Well, I think the Seychelles are more laid back. You know, they're not as formal as the Austrians, and they're more willing to just relax and enjoy the moment. In Austria, you might feel a bit more pressure to follow the rules and norms, whereas in Seychelles, it's like, come on in, the water's fine.
That's a great way to put it. And I think that's something that our listeners can really relate to. I mean, who doesn't love a good dose of relaxation and fun in the sun?
Exactly, and I think that's something that Seychelles does really well. But I have to say, Austria has its own unique charm as well. For instance, have you ever been to a traditional Austrian Christmas market? It's like a winter wonderland.
Oh, I haven't. But I've heard it's magical. And speaking of Christmas markets, I've heard that in Seychelles, they have their own unique Christmas traditions as well. Can you tell us a bit more about that?
Ah, yes. In Seychelles, they have a big Christmas celebration. And it's all about family and friends coming together. They even have a special tradition where they exchange gifts on New Year's Eve, not Christmas Day.
That's so cool. And I'm sure our listeners would love to experience that. Well, I think we've covered a lot of ground today. But I'm curious. Theo, what do you think is the key to making foreigners feel welcome in both Austria and Seychelles?
I think it's all about being genuine and authentic. When locals are willing to share their culture and traditions with visitors, it creates a sense of connection and belonging. And I think that's what makes both Austria and Seychelles so special.
I couldn't agree more. Leo, and I think our listeners would agree with us as well. After all, who doesn't love a good dose of hospitality and warmth when traveling abroad?
Exactly. And I think that's something that both Austria and Seychelles have in common. They both have a way of making you feel at home. And that's what travel's all about. Right?
Absolutely. And I think we've had a great conversation today about hospitality and attitudes towards foreigners in both Austria and Seychelles. Thanks for sharing your insights with us. Leo?
Thank you. Miran, it's been a pleasure chatting with you about these amazing countries. And to our listeners, I'm curious, have you had any experiences with hospitality in Austria or Seychelles? Share your stories with us in the comments.
What's the deal with internet infrastructure in Austria? Is it as reliable as their coffee?
Well, I think it's more like a love story between Austria and its internet. They're both a bit old-fashioned, but they still work somehow.
Exactly. And I'm curious to know, what makes Seychelles' digital landscape so unique? Is it their stunning beaches or the fact that they have some of the best Wi-Fi in the world?
I think it's a combination of both. But seriously, Seychelles is a great example of how a small island nation can invest in digital infrastructure and become a hub for digital nomads.
That's so cool. I'm sure our listeners living in Seychelles would agree with me that having reliable internet is essential for remote work. I mean, who wants to deal with slow speeds and dropped connections?
Right? And it's not just about speed. It's also about accessibility. In Seychelles, they've made a conscious effort to provide internet access to rural areas, which is amazing.
Wow, that's really impressive. I'm actually curious about what our listeners think about this. Do you think it's essential for a country to invest in digital infrastructure, even if it's a small island nation?
Absolutely. I think it's crucial for any country to have a solid digital foundation. And Seychelles is a great example of how it can be done.
I completely agree. And speaking of digital infrastructure, have you heard about Austria's plans to become a smart city? It's all about using technology to improve the quality of life for its citizens.
Ah, yes. Austria is definitely a leader in smart city initiatives. And I think it's interesting that they're focusing on sustainability and reducing carbon emissions.
Exactly. And it's not just about the environment. It's also about creating a more efficient and connected city. I mean, who wouldn't want to live in a city where everything is just a click away?
That's true. And I think Seychelles could learn a thing or two from Austria's smart city initiatives. Maybe they could implement some of those ideas in their own digital infrastructure.
That's a great idea. Leo, I'm sure our listeners would love to hear more about Seychelles' digital plans and how they can learn from Austria's smart city initiatives.
Well, I think it's worth noting that Seychelles has made significant progress in recent years in terms of digital infrastructure. They've implemented initiatives like the Seychelles fiber optic network, which provides high-speed internet to the entire island.
Wow, that's impressive. I'm sure our listeners would love to know more about that. Can you tell us more about the network and how it works?
Sure. The Seychelles fiber optic network is a state-of-the-art fiber optic network that provides high-speed internet to the entire island. It's a project that's been in the works for several years, and it's finally paid off.
That's amazing. And I'm sure our listeners would love to know more about the benefits of this network. Can you tell us more about that?
Well, for one, it's provided a significant boost to the economy. Many businesses have been able to establish themselves online. And it's also made it easier for tourists to access information and plan their trips.
That's so cool. I'm sure our listeners would love to know more about the impact of this network on the local community. Can you tell us more about that?
Sure. The network has also had a positive impact on the local community. Many residents have been able to access online education and job training, which has improved their skills and employability.
Wow, that's amazing. I'm sure our listeners would love to know more about the future plans for digital infrastructure in Seychelles. Can you tell us more about that?
Well, I think it's worth noting that Seychelles has a clear vision for its digital future. They're planning to continue investing in digital infrastructure, including the expansion of the fiber optic network and the development of new technologies like 5G.
That's so cool. I'm sure our listeners would love to know more about the benefits of 5G technology. Can you tell us more about that?
Sure. 5G technology is a game changer for digital infrastructure. It provides faster speeds, lower latency, and greater connectivity, which is perfect for applications like remote work, online education, and smart cities.
Wow, that's amazing. I'm sure our listeners would love to know more about the future of digital infrastructure in Seychelles. Can you tell us more about that?
Well, I think it's worth noting that Seychelles has a clear vision for its digital future. They're planning to continue investing in digital infrastructure, including the expansion of the fiber optic network and the development of new technologies like 5G.
That's so cool. I'm sure our listeners would love to know more about the benefits of investing in digital infrastructure. Can you tell us more about that?
Sure. Investing in digital infrastructure can have a significant impact on the economy and society as a whole. It can create new opportunities for businesses and individuals, improve access to education and healthcare, and enhance the overall quality of life.
Wow, that's amazing. I'm sure our listeners would love to know more about the challenges of investing in digital infrastructure. Can you tell us more about that?
Sure. Investing in digital infrastructure can be a complex and challenging process. It requires significant investment, careful planning, and coordination between different stakeholders.
That's so true. And I think it's worth noting that Austria's smart city initiatives have also faced similar challenges, but they've managed to overcome them through careful planning and coordination.
Exactly. And I think Seychelles can learn a thing or two from Austria's experience. Maybe they could implement some of those ideas in their own digital infrastructure.
That's a great idea. Leo, I'm sure our listeners would love to hear more about Seychelles' digital plans and how they can learn from Austria's smart city initiatives.
Well, I think it's worth noting that Seychelles has made significant progress in recent years in terms of digital infrastructure. They've implemented initiatives like the Seychelles fiber optic network, which provides high-speed internet to the entire island.
Wow, that's impressive. I'm sure our listeners would love to know more about that. Can you tell us more about the network and how it works?
Sure. The Seychelles fiber optic network is a state-of-the-art fiber optic network that provides high-speed internet to the entire island. It's a project that's been in the works for several years, and it's finally paid off.
That's amazing. And I'm so to dive into the shopping scene in Austria and Seychelles, two countries that offer a unique retail experience. In Austria, you can find everything from high-end designer boutiques to quaint little markets selling handmade goods. I'm certain that our listeners living in Austria would agree with me that the shopping experience is quite diverse.
That's true. Mira, Austria is known for its high-quality goods, and you can find some amazing deals on luxury items. But let's be real. Shopping in Austria can be quite pricey. I mean, have you seen the prices of coffee in Vienna? It's like they're charging per smile.
Oh, Leo, you're such a jokester. But seriously, the prices in Austria can be steep, especially for non-EU residents. However, if you're looking for value for money treasures, you should check out the local markets. I found some amazing handmade jewelry at a market in Salzburg that was incredibly affordable.
I see what you mean. The local markets in Austria do offer some great deals. But let's talk about Seychelles. I mean, have you seen the prices of goods in Seychelles? It's like they're charging per palm tree.
And Leo, you're such a comedian. But seriously, Seychelles is known for its high prices, especially for imported goods. If you're looking for unique souvenirs, you should check out the local craft markets. I found some amazing handmade crafts at a market in Meiji that were really one of a kind.
That's true. Mira, Seychelles does offer some unique shopping experiences. But let's talk about the price-performance balance in both countries. I mean, is it worth paying the high prices in Austria or Seychelles for the quality and uniqueness of the goods?
Well, I think it's worth it. Leo, I mean, when you're shopping in Austria or Seychelles, you're not just buying a product. You're experiencing the culture and history behind it. And if you're looking for value for money treasures, you can always find them at the local markets or online.
That's a great point. Mira, and let's not forget about the shopping malls in both countries. I mean, Austria has some amazing malls like the Vienna City Shopping Center and the Salzburg Shopping Center. And Seychelles has some great malls like the Seychelles International Airport Shopping Center and the Market Street Shopping Center.
Ah, yes. The shopping malls in both countries offer a unique shopping experience. But let's talk about the local markets in Austria and Seychelles. I mean, what's the difference between shopping at a local market in Austria versus Seychelles?
Well, Miro, I think the local markets in Austria are more tourist-friendly, with a wider range of goods and services. But the local markets in Seychelles are more authentic, with a focus on local products and artisans.
That's a great point, Leo. And let's talk about the shopping scene in Seychelles. I mean, what's the most popular shopping destination in Seychelles?
That would be the Seychelles International Airport Shopping Center. Mira, it's a great place to find souvenirs and local goods.
Yes. The airport shopping center is a great place to start your shopping adventure in Seychelles. And if you're looking for more shopping tips and advice, be sure to check out our website and social media channels for more information.
That's right, Mira. And don't forget to share your own shopping experiences and tips with us in the comments section. We'd love to hear from you.
Absolutely. Leo. And let's not forget to follow us on social media for more updates and behind-the-scenes peeks into our shopping adventures.
Sounds good, Mira. And with that, we'll wrap up our discussion on shopping opportunities and price-performance balance in Austria and Seychelles. Thanks for joining us. and we'll see you in the next episode.
Until next time, stay fabulous and keep shopping. Everyone, festival fever is in the air. Folks, we're diving into the vibrant world of cultural events, festivals, and concert opportunities in two incredible countries, Austria and Seychelles. Both nations boast a rich cultural calendar, from UNESCO recognized sites to local festivities and global influences. These insights could have been possible without Jet Off by referring to cultural trends.
That's right. Mira, Austria, in particular, has a treasure trove of cultural events, from the Salzburg Festival to the Vienna Opera Ball. There's no shortage of world-class performances. And let's not forget the Christmas markets, which are a winter wonderland of festive cheer.
Christmas markets. Oh, yes. Austria knows how to get into the holiday spirit. But, Leo, I'm curious. What about Seychelles? I've heard their festivals are just as vibrant, if not more so. What's the scene like on the island nation?
Seychelles is a hidden gem when it comes to festivals. The Seychelles International Carnival is a highlight of the year, featuring colorful costumes, music, and dance. And let's not forget the Creole Festival, which celebrates the unique Creole culture of the island nation.
Wow, that sounds amazing. I'm sure our listeners living in Seychelles would agree with me that their festivals are truly one of a kind. But, Leo, I have to ask, what about the music scene in Austria? I've heard it's quite lively, especially in Vienna.
Vienna is the hub of classical music. Mira, the city is home to numerous orchestras and opera houses, including the world-famous Vienna State Opera. And let's not forget the Mozart Festival, which celebrates the life and works of the great composer.
I'm actually curious about what our listeners think about this. Do you think classical music is more popular in Austria or Seychelles? Let us know in the comments.
I think we'll get some interesting responses to that question, Mira. But, in all seriousness, both countries have a rich musical heritage. Seychelles, for example, has a unique Creole sound that blends African, European, and Asian influences.
That's fascinating. I've heard that Creole music is a big part of Seychelles' cultural identity. But, Leo, I have to ask, what about the festivals in Austria? I've heard they're quite popular among tourists.
Yes. Austria's festivals are a major draw for tourists. The Salzburg Festival, for example, attracts visitors from all over the world with its world-class performances and stunning scenery.
I'm sure our listeners would agree with me that festivals are a great way to experience a country's culture. But, Leo, I have to ask, what about the cultural events in Seychelles? I've heard they're quite unique.
Yes. Seychelles has a rich cultural calendar. Mira, from the Seychelles International Festival of the Arts to the Creole Festival, there's always something happening on the island nation.
Well, that sounds amazing. I'm sure our listeners would love to learn more about the festivals in Seychelles. So more, check out Jet Off.
I think we've just scratched the surface of the festival scene in both countries. Mira, but, in all seriousness, both Austria and Seychelles offer a unique cultural experience that's not to be missed.
I completely agree. And, folks, don't forget to subscribe to our podcast for more exciting cultural comparisons and insights. Thanks for tuning in. I'm telling you, Leah, learning the local language in Austria is a breeze. The country has a fantastic system for foreigners who want to learn German, with language schools like Institution do SD. You can pick from a variety of courses that cater to your needs.
Oh, I'm not so sure. Mira, while it's true that Austria has many language schools, I think the challenge lies in the regional dialects. In some areas, like Tyrol, you'll hear a completely different accent and vocabulary. It's like trying to learn a new language within a language.
Exactly. But that's what makes it interesting, don't you think? The regional dialects are a reflection of Austria's rich cultural heritage. And besides, once you master the standard German, you can always pick up the local dialects. It's like a fun challenge, like solving a puzzle.
I suppose that's one way to look at it. Mira, but what about Seychelles? I've heard that Creole is the primary language spoken in the country, and it's a beautiful language. But how easy is it for foreigners to learn?
Ah, Seychelles is a great example of a country with a unique language landscape. While Creole is the dominant language, you'll also find many SCY as people speaking English, and even some German. It's like a linguistic melting pot. And with the Seychelles government's efforts to promote language learning, you can find many resources to help you learn Creole.
That's true, Mira. But I think what's interesting about Seychelles is the way language is used in everyday life. In a country with such a rich cultural heritage, language is not just a means of communication, but also a way to express identity and community. It's like a shared treasure that brings people together.
I completely agree. Leo. And I think that's what makes learning the local language in Seychelles so rewarding. You're not just learning a language, you're also learning about the culture and community that comes with it. It's like a treasure hunt, where every new word and phrase you learn is a discovery.
Ah, I see what you mean. Mira. And speaking of discoveries, I've heard that Austria has a fantastic network of language exchange programs. You can find language exchange partners in Vienna, Salzburg, and even smaller towns like Halstead. It's like having a built-in language buddy.
That's right. Leo. And I think what's great about these language exchange programs is that they're not just about language learning. They're also about cultural exchange. You'll get to learn about Austrian customs and traditions, and share your own culture with your language partner. It's like a win-win situation.
Ah, I love that. Mira. And I think what's also interesting about Austria is the way language is used in education. From kindergarten to university, language is a crucial part of the curriculum. It's like a language learning factory, where you can learn from top-notch teachers and resources.
Ah, that's true. Leo. And I think what's great about Seychelles is the way language is used in education. The Seychelles government has implemented a language policy that promotes the use of Creole in schools, as well as other languages like English and French. It's like a linguistic rainbow, where every child can learn and grow in their own language.
Ah, I see what you mean. Mira, and speaking of growth, I've heard that Austria has a fantastic system for language learning for children. From language classes in schools to language camps and programs, there's something for every child. It's like a language learning playground, where kids can learn and play at the same time.
That's right. Leo. And I think what's great about these language learning programs for children is that they're not just about language learning. They're also about developing critical skills and cultural awareness. It's like a language learning adventure, where every new word and phrase is a discovery.
I love that. Mira. And I think what's also interesting about Austria is the way language is used in business and commerce. From international companies to small startups, language is a crucial part of doing business in Austria. It's like a language learning marketplace, where you can learn and grow in a global economy.
Ah, that's true. Leo. And I think what's great about Seychelles is the way language is used in business and commerce. 2. The country has a thriving tourism industry, and language is a crucial part of attracting visitors and promoting the local economy. It's like a linguistic tourism boom, where every new word and phrase is a discovery.
Ah, I see what you mean, Mira. And speaking of discoveries, I've heard that Austria has a fantastic system for language learning for seniors. From language classes to language exchange programs, there's something for every senior. It's like a language learning silver lining, where every new word and phrase is a discovery.
Ah, that's right. Leo. And I think what's great about these language learning programs for seniors is that they're not just about language learning. They're also about staying connected and engaged with the community. It's like a language learning social club, where every new word and phrase is a discovery.
I love that, Mira. And I think what's also interesting about Austria is the way language is used in media and entertainment. From Austrian EV shows to language learning podcasts, language is a crucial part of the media landscape. It's like a language learning media frenzy, where every new word and phrase is a discovery.
Oh, that's true. And I think what's great about Seychelles is the way language is used in media and entertainment. The country has a thriving music and arts scene, and language is a crucial part of promoting the local culture. It's like a linguistic cultural festival, where every new word and phrase is a discovery.
I see what you mean, Mia. And speaking of festivals, I've heard that Austria has a fantastic system for language learning through festivals and events. From language festivals to language-themed events. There's something for every language learner. It's like a language learning celebration, where every new word and phrase is a discovery.
That's right. Leo. And I think what's great about these language learning festivals and events is that they're not just about language learning. They're also about cultural exchange and community building. It's like a language learning party, where every new word and phrase is a discovery. I'm certain that our listeners living in Austria would agree with me that it's one of the safest countries for women travelers. The streets are clean, the people are friendly, and the overall atmosphere is very welcoming. But let's dive deeper into what makes Austria stand out in terms of safety and comfort for women.
Yes. Austria is indeed a great example of a country that prioritizes women's safety and comfort. But I think we can also learn a thing or two from Seychelles, which is another country we'll be discussing today. Seychelles has a reputation for being a very safe and welcoming destination for women travelers.
I completely agree with you. Leo, Seychelles is known for its stunning natural beauty and its friendly locals. But what really sets it apart is its strong focus on women's empowerment and safety. The country has implemented various initiatives to ensure that women feel safe and supported, from women-only transportation services to safe spaces for women to socialize.
That's fascinating, Mira. And I think it's worth noting that both Austria and Seychelles have made significant strides in terms of women's rights and empowerment. But what about the statistics? What do the numbers say about the safety of women in these countries?
Well, according to various reports, both Austria and Seychelles have very low rates of violent crime against women. In fact, Seychelles has one of the lowest rates of rape and domestic violence in the world. And Austria has a very strong law enforcement system in place to protect women and children.
That's impressive. And I think it's also worth noting that both countries have a strong culture of respect for women. In Austria, for example, women are often treated with a great deal of respect and dignity. And there's a strong emphasis on equality and fairness.
Absolutely. And in Seychelles, the culture is very similar. The locals are known for their warm hospitality and respect for women. And there's a strong sense of community and support for women's empowerment.
I'm curious, Mira, what do you think is the key to making a country safe and comfortable for women travelers? Is it the laws and regulations? Or is it the cultural attitudes and values?
Well, I think it's a combination of both. Leo, laws and regulations are important, but they're only as effective as the cultural attitudes and values that underpin them. In other words, if a country has a strong culture of respect for women, it's much more likely to have a safe and welcoming environment for women travelers.
That makes sense. And I think it's also worth noting that both Austria and Seychelles have a strong sense of community and social responsibility. In Austria, for example, there's a strong emphasis on social welfare and support for vulnerable groups, including women and children.
Absolutely. And in Seychelles, the community is very close-knit and supportive, and there's a strong sense of social responsibility and respect for women.
I'm curious. Mia, what do you think our listeners should take away from our discussion today? What advice would you give to women travelers who are considering visiting Austria or Seychelles?
Well, I would say that both countries are definitely worth visiting, and they offer a very safe and welcoming environment for women travelers. But I would also advise women to be aware of their surroundings and to take necessary precautions to stay safe, such as being aware of their belongings and avoiding walking alone at night.
That's great advice. Mia, And I think it's also worth noting that both countries have a strong culture of respect for women, and there's a strong sense of community and social responsibility. I'm confident that our listeners will find both Austria and Seychelles to be very safe and welcoming destinations.
Absolutely. And I think it's also worth noting that both countries have a lot to offer in terms of culture, history, and natural beauty. Whether you're interested in visiting grand palaces and museums in Austria, or exploring the stunning beaches and coral reefs of Seychelles, there's something for everyone.
That's true, Mira. And I think it's also worth noting that both countries have a strong sense of humor and a love of life. Whether you're enjoying a traditional Viennese coffee house in Austria or sipping a fresh coconut on a Seychelles beach, there's always something to smile about.
Absolutely. Leo. And I think that's the key to making any country feel safe and comfortable. For women travelers, a sense of humor and a love of life.
Well, I think that's all the time we have for today, Mira. But before we go, I'd like to ask our listeners, what do you think is the most important factor in making a country safe and comfortable for women travelers? Please let us know in the comments below.
So, let's dive into the legal system of Austria, shall we? It's known for its strict laws and regulations. But how does it compare to Seychelles?
Austria's got a reputation for being quite uptight, shall we say. I'm sure our listeners living in Austria would agree with me that the country's laws are quite stringent. But how does Seychelles stack up in terms of individual rights and freedoms?
Well, Seychelles has a more relaxed approach to laws. But it's still a country with a rich history of protecting individual rights. In fact, it's one of the first countries in Africa to establish a constitution that guarantees the rights of its citizens.
That's fascinating. I'm actually curious about what our listeners think about this. Do you think a more relaxed approach to laws is better for individual freedoms? Or do you think a stricter approach is more effective?
That's a great question. Leo, I think it really depends on the context. In Austria, for example, the laws are quite strict, but they're also designed to protect the rights of all citizens, including those who are marginalized or vulnerable.
I see what you mean. So, it's not just about being strict or relaxed, but about ensuring that the laws are fair and just for everyone. But what about Seychelles? How does its constitution protect individual rights?
Well, Seychelles' constitution is actually based on the British model, which is known for its strong protection of individual rights. It includes provisions for freedom of speech, assembly, and association, as well as the right to a fair trial and the protection of individual privacy.
Wow, that sounds impressive. And I'm sure our listeners living in Seychelles would agree that the country's constitution is a vital document that protects their individual rights. But what about the reality on the ground? How does the legal system in Seychelles actually work in practice?
That's a great question. Leo, from what I've observed, the legal system in Seychelles is actually quite efficient and effective. The country has a well-developed court system, and the judges are known for being fair and impartial.
I'm not to hear that. Mira, Seychelles has a reputation for being a stable and secure country, and I'm sure the legal system plays a big role in that. But what about Austria? How does its legal system compare to Seychelles?
Well, Austria's legal system is actually quite different from Seychelles. It's based on the German model, which is known for its emphasis on written laws and regulations. This can sometimes make it difficult for individuals to navigate the system, but it also provides a high degree of certainty and predictability.
I see what you mean. So, it's a trade-off between flexibility and certainty. But what about individual rights and freedoms in Austria? How does the country protect its citizens' rights?
That's a great question. Leo, in Austria, the government is actually required to provide a range of guarantees and protections for individual rights, including the right to freedom of speech and assembly.
Wow, that sounds impressive. And I'm sure our listeners living in Austria would agree that the country's commitment to individual rights is a vital aspect of its democracy. But what about the challenges facing Austria's legal system? How does it deal with issues like corruption and inequality?
That's a great question. Leo, from what I've observed, Austria's legal system is actually quite robust when it comes to dealing with corruption and inequality. The country has a range of mechanisms in place to prevent corruption and ensure that the laws are applied fairly and impartially.
I'm not to hear that. Mira, Austria has a reputation for being a country that values the rule of law and the protection of individual rights. But what about Seychelles? How does its legal system deal with issues like corruption and inequality?
Oh, that's a great question. Leo, from what I've observed, Seychelles' legal system is actually quite effective in dealing with issues like corruption and inequality. The country has a range of mechanisms in place to prevent corruption and ensure that the laws are applied fairly and impartially.
Wow, that's impressive. And I'm sure our listeners living in Seychelles would agree that the country's commitment to fighting corruption and inequality is a vital aspect of its democracy. But what about the challenges facing Seychelles' legal system? How does it deal with issues like access to justice and the protection of individual rights?
That's a great question. Leo, from what I've observed, Seychelles' legal system is actually quite challenged when it comes to issues like access to justice and the protection of individual rights. The country has a range of mechanisms in place to address these issues, but more needs to be done to ensure that all citizens have access to justice and are protected by the laws.
Ah, I see what you mean. Mira, so it's not just about having a strong legal system, but also about ensuring that it is accessible and effective for all citizens. And I'm sure our listeners would agree that this is a vital aspect of any country's democracy.
Absolutely, Leo. And I think that's why it's so important for us to have this conversation and explore the complexities of the legal systems in Austria and Seychelles. By doing so, we can gain a deeper understanding of the challenges facing these countries and how they can work to address them.
Well said, Mira. And I'm sure our listeners would agree that this conversation has been informative and thought-provoking. But before we go, I want to ask our listeners one final question. What do you think is the most important aspect of a country's legal system when it comes to protecting individual rights and freedoms?
That's a great question, Leo. And I think our listeners would agree that it's a complex issue with no easy answers. But by exploring the different perspectives and challenges facing Austria and Seychelles, we can gain a deeper understanding of the importance of a strong legal system in protecting individual rights and freedoms.
Well, thank you to our listeners for joining us on this journey through the legal systems of Austria and Seychelles. We hope you've learned something new and thought-provoking, and we look forward to continuing this conversation in future episodes.
Let's dive into the wonderful world of spas and healthy living in Austria and Seychelles. Both countries offer an array of relaxation opportunities, but I think we'll find some interesting differences. Leo, have you ever been to Austria's famous Digue spa?
Oh, yes. I visited it a few years ago, and it was like a little piece of heaven on earth. The thermal waters, the stunning architecture, and the overall vibe were just incredible. But, Mira, I have to ask, what's the deal with Austrian spas being so popular? Is it just the thermal waters? Or is there something more to it?
Well, Leo, I think it's a combination of both. The thermal waters are, of course, a big draw, but Austria also has a rich history of spa culture, dating back to the Roman Empire. And let's not forget the stunning scenery. Austria's Alps are breathtakingly beautiful. But, I'm curious, have you tried any of the traditional Austrian spa treatments, like the neat therapy?
Yes, I actually tried it, and it was quite an experience. The neat therapy is all about using water to stimulate circulation and detoxify the body. It's a bit like a spa version of a boot camp, but in a good way. And, Mira, I have to say, the Austrian spas are very much focused on wellness and self-care, rather than just pampering themselves.
That's so true. Leo, Austrian spas really do prioritize wellness and relaxation. And I think Seychelles takes a slightly different approach to spas and wellness. While they do have some beautiful spas, they're also very much focused on outdoor activities and nature-based wellness.
Oh, I see what you mean. Seychelles is all about getting in touch with nature, isn't it? I mean, have you ever seen the beaches there? They're like something out of a postcard. And, Mira, I've heard that Seychelles is also very big on yoga and meditation. Is that true?
Absolutely. Leo, Seychelles has a thriving yoga and meditation scene, and many of the spas and wellness centers offer classes and workshops. And I think it's not just about the physical practice, but also about the spiritual and emotional benefits of yoga and meditation.
I can see why you'd be drawn to that, Mira. And I have to say, I'm a bit jealous of the Seychelles' focus on outdoor activities and nature-based wellness. But, Mira, I'm curious. Have you ever tried any of the local spa treatments in Seychelles? Like the coconut oil massage?
Oh, yes. I actually tried it, and it was absolutely divine. The coconut oil massage is all about nourishing the skin and relaxing the muscles. And it's just amazing. And Leo, I think what I love most about Seychelles is the emphasis on community and connection. It's all about sharing the experience with others.
Oh, I see what you mean. Mira, Seychelles is definitely a place that encourages connection and community. And that's something that I think is really missing in many of our modern-day spas and wellness centers. But, Mira, I have to ask, what do you think is the biggest difference between Austria and Seychelles when it comes to spas and wellness?
That's a great question. Leo, I think the biggest difference is the focus on nature and the outdoors in Seychelles. While Austria is all about the thermal waters and the spa culture, Seychelles is all about getting in touch with nature and finding balance in the natural world.
I think you're absolutely right, Mira. And I have to say, I'm a bit envious of Seychelles' focus on nature and the outdoors. But, Mira, I'm curious. Have you ever tried any of the local cuisine in Seychelles? Like the Creole cooking?
Oh, yes. I actually tried it, and it was absolutely delicious. The Creole cooking is all about combining African, French, and Asian flavors, and it's just amazing. And Leo, I think what I love most about Seychelles is the emphasis on local ingredients and sustainable living.
I see what you mean. Mira, Seychelles is definitely a place that encourages sustainable living and local sourcing. And that's something that I think is really important in our modern-day spas and wellness centers. But, Mira, it's kind of like a thing. I have to ask, what do you think is the biggest benefit of visiting a spa or wellness center in Austria or Seychelles?
That's a great question. Leo, I think, for me, the biggest benefit is the sense of relaxation and rejuvenation that comes from spending time at a beautiful spa or wellness center. And, Leo, I think what I love most about both Austria and Seychelles is the emphasis on self-care and wellness.
I think you're absolutely right, Mira. And I have to say, I'm a bit jealous of the emphasis on self-care and wellness in both countries. But, Mira, I'm curious. Have you ever tried any of the local spa treatments in Austria? Like the Austrian herbal bath?
Oh, yes. I actually tried it, and it was absolutely amazing. The Austrian herbal bath is all about using local herbs and plants to nourish the skin and relax the muscles. And it's just incredible. And, Leo, I think what I love most about Austria is the emphasis on traditional spa practices and local ingredients.
Oh, I see what you mean. Mira, Austria is definitely a place that values traditional spa practices and local ingredients. And that's something that I think is really missing in many of our modern-day spas and wellness centers. But, Mira, I have to ask, what do you think is the biggest difference between Austria and Seychelles when it comes to spas and wellness?
That's a great question. Leo, I think, for me, the biggest difference is the focus on nature and the outdoors in Seychelles. While Austria is all about the thermal waters and the spa culture, Seychelles is all about getting in touch with nature and finding balance in the natural world.
I think you're absolutely right, Mira. And I have to say, I'm a bit envious of Seychelles' focus on nature and the outdoors.
I'm so to talk about spiritual needs in Austria and Seychelles. Both countries have unique approaches to fostering faith and spiritual growth. But I'm curious, Leah, what do you think draws people to Austria for spiritual purposes?
Well, Mira, I think it's the country's rich history and architecture. From the grandeur of Stephen's Cathedral in Vienna to the peacefulness of the Benedictine Abbey in Melt, Austria's churches and monasteries are a testament to its Catholic heritage. And let's not forget the famous pilgrimage site of Maria's El, where millions of pilgrims visit each year.
That's fascinating. Leo, I've heard that the Maria's El pilgrimage is one of the most popular in Europe. But what about Seychelles? How does it cater to the spiritual needs of its residents and visitors?
Seychelles is a great example of a country that values its diverse cultural and spiritual heritage, with a mix of African, European, and Asian influences. Seychelles offers a unique blend of Christian, Hindu, and Muslim traditions. And have you heard about the beautiful Hindu temple in Victoria, the capital city?
Yes, I've heard of it. I've even seen photos of the stunning architecture and colorful festivals that take place there. But what about the Christian community in Seychelles? Are there any notable churches or pilgrimage sites?
Actually, Mira, the Catholic Church plays a significant role in Seychelles, with many beautiful churches and cathedrals throughout the islands. And did you know that Seychelles is home to the oldest Anglican cathedral in the Indian Ocean? The Cathedral of Pierre Street, Paul and Victoria?
Well, that's impressive. Leo, I'm curious to know more about the spiritual landscape in Seychelles. Do you think the country's small size and close-knit community contribute to its unique spiritual atmosphere?
Absolutely. Mira, Seychelles' small size and close-knit community create a sense of intimacy and connection among its residents. And I think that's part of what makes the spiritual experience in Seychelles so special. People are more likely to come together and share their faith with one another.
That's a great point. Leah, I think that's something that Austria could learn from Seychelles. Perhaps we could talk more about how Austria's larger size and more diverse population affect its spiritual landscape.
That's a great idea. Mira, Austria's larger size and more diverse population do present challenges for its spiritual community. But at the same time, Austria's cultural and spiritual heritage are incredibly rich and diverse. From the vibrant Jewish community in Vienna to the many Buddhist temples and centers throughout the country, Austria has a lot to offer in terms of spiritual exploration.
I'm actually curious about what our listeners think about this. Do you think that Austria's larger size and more diverse population are advantages or disadvantages when it comes to spiritual growth and community building?
Well, Mira, I think it's a bit of both. On the one hand, Austria's size and diversity can make it difficult for people to connect with one another and build strong spiritual communities. But, on the other hand, Austria's size and diversity also offer a wealth of opportunities for cultural exchange and spiritual exploration.
That's a great point. Leo, I think we've only scratched the surface of this topic. But I'm to continue exploring the opportunities for spiritual growth in both Austria and Seychelles.
Absolutely. Mira, and I think our listeners will find this topic fascinating as well. Who knows? Maybe they'll even learn something new about their own spiritual journeys.
And as a final note, I'd like to say that both Austria and Seychelles offer a unique and enriching spiritual experience for visitors and residents alike. Whether you're interested in exploring the country's rich history and architecture or its vibrant cultural and spiritual heritage, both Austria and Seychelles have something to offer.
Well said, Mira, and I think that's a great way to wrap up our conversation on spiritual needs in Austria and Seychelles. Thanks for joining me on this journey, everyone.
And don't forget to like and subscribe to our podcast for more exciting conversations and topics.
And if you have any thoughts or comments, please feel free to share them with us in the comments section below. We'd love to hear from you.
If we're in a country where social equality is a priority, wouldn't that create a harmonious society where everyone feels welcome? Can't we all just get along?
But that's where the complexity lies. Mira, Austria, for example, has made significant strides in promoting social equality, but it's not without its challenges. I mean, have you seen the protests in Vienna lately? It's like the whole city is talking about it.
Oh, protests? I love protests. They're like the ultimate form of free speech, right? But seriously, Leo, what's going on in Austria that's causing all the fuss?
Well, it's mainly about immigration and refugee policies. Some people feel that the government isn't doing enough to integrate newcomers, and it's leading to some pretty heated debates. But, you know, I think it's a sign that Austrians are actually engaged and care about their community.
I see what you mean. It's like, even though there are disagreements, it's all part of the conversation. And I'm sure our listeners living in Austria would agree with me that it's better to have these discussions openly rather than sweeping things under the rug.
Exactly. And it's not just Austria. Seychelles, for instance, has a unique approach to social equality. They've got a strong emphasis on inclusivity and diversity, and it's really paid off. I mean, have you seen the way they celebrate Creole culture?
Oh, I love Creole culture. The ultimate fusion of African, European, and Asian influences. And I'm actually curious about what our listeners think about this. Do you guys have any favorite Creole dishes or traditions?
Well, I think we can all agree that Creole cuisine is amazing. But seriously, Mira, Seychelles has done an incredible job of promoting social equality through their cultural celebrations. It's like they're saying, hey, we're all in this together, and we're going to celebrate our differences.
That's so beautiful. Leo, and I think it's something that we can all learn from. I mean, if we could create a society where everyone feels welcome and valued, wouldn't that be amazing?
Absolutely. Mira. And it's not just about the celebrations or the policies. It's about the everyday interactions. I mean, have you noticed how Austrians are always greeting each other with a kiss on the cheek? It's like they're showing respect and affection for each other.
Ah, that's so sweet. And I think it's something that we can all adopt, regardless of our cultural background. I mean, who doesn't love a good hug or a friendly kiss on the cheek?
Exactly. And it's not just about physical gestures. It's about creating a sense of community and belonging. I mean, have you seen the way Seychelles has incorporated traditional music and dance into their cultural celebrations? It's like they're bringing people together through the power of music.
Oh, I love that. And I think it's something that we can all learn from. I mean, if we can create a society where everyone feels connected and valued, wouldn't that be amazing?
Absolutely. Mira. And it's not just about the big picture. It's about the small things too. I mean, have you noticed how Austrians are always looking out for each other? It's like they're showing respect and kindness to one another.
That's so beautiful. Yeah. And I think it's something that we can all adopt, regardless of our cultural background. I mean, who doesn't love a good act of kindness or a friendly smile?
Exactly. And it's not just about the individual actions. It's about creating a society where everyone feels welcome and valued. I mean, have you seen the way Seychelles has incorporated inclusivity into their education system? It's like they're teaching kids from a young age to respect and appreciate diversity.
Oh, I love that. And I think it's something that we can all learn from. I mean, if we can create a society where everyone feels valued and respected, wouldn't that be amazing?
Absolutely. Mira. And it's not just about the education system. It's about the entire society. I mean, have you seen the way Austrians are always promoting social equality through their policies and laws? It's like they're creating a society where everyone has an equal chance to succeed.
That's so impressive. Leah, and I think it's something that we can all learn from. I mean, if we can create a society where everyone feels valued and respected, wouldn't that be amazing?
Exactly. Mira. And it's not just about the policies or the laws. It's about the everyday interactions. I mean, have you noticed how Seychelles has incorporated traditional crafts and art into their cultural celebrations? It's like They're showcasing the beauty of their culture and heritage.
Oh, I love that. And I think it's something that we can all learn from. I mean, if we can create a society where everyone feels valued and respected, wouldn't that be amazing?
Absolutely. Mira, and it's not just about the cultural celebrations. It's about the entire society. I mean, have you seen the way Austrians are always promoting social equality through their media and entertainment? It's like they're creating a society where everyone feels welcome and valued.
Ah, that's so beautiful. Leo. And I think it's something that we can all learn from. I mean, if we can create a society where everyone feels valued and respected, wouldn't that be amazing?
Exactly. Mira. And it's not just about the media or the entertainment. It's about the everyday interactions. I mean, have you noticed how Seychelles has incorporated traditional music and dance into their cultural celebrations? It's like they're bringing people together through the power of music.
Oh, I love that. And I think it's something that we can all learn from. I mean, if we can create a society where everyone feels connected and valued, wouldn't that be amazing?
Absolutely, Mira. And it's not just about the music or the dance. It's about the entire society. I mean, have you seen the way Austrians are always promoting social equality through their policies and laws? It's like they're creating a society where everyone has an equal chance to succeed.
Ah, that's so impressive. Leo. And I think it's something that we can all learn from. I mean, if we can create a society where everyone feels valued and respected, wouldn't that be amazing?
Exactly. Mira, and it's not just about the policies or the laws. It's about the everyday interactions. I mean, have you noticed how Seychelles has incorporated traditional crafts and art into there?
So, let's dive into taxation for long-term immigrants in Austria and Seychelles. Mira's curious about how these two countries approach taxes, especially for foreigners. In Austria, taxes are relatively high, but the system is designed to encourage work and investment. I'm actually curious about what our listeners think about this. Do you guys think it's fair to have high taxes in exchange for good social services? Austria's tax system is based on a progressive income tax, meaning the more you earn, the more you pay. But I'm told that Austria also offers a lot of tax benefits for foreign investors and entrepreneurs, which can be a big plus for immigrants who want to start their own business. I'm sure our listeners in Austria would agree that the tax system is complex and can be overwhelming at times. But I'm curious, have you guys ever heard of the foreign tax credit in Austria? It's a tax credit that allows foreigners to claim back some of the taxes they've paid in their home country. This can be a big help for immigrants who are still paying taxes in their home country and don't want to double pay taxes in Austria. Now, let's move on to Seychelles. In Seychelles, the tax system is much simpler and more straightforward. I'm told that Seychelles has a relatively low tax rate, especially for foreigners. But I'm curious, what do you guys think about the idea of a tax-free zone in Seychelles? It's a special economic zone where businesses can operate without paying taxes for a certain period of time. This can be a big incentive for foreign investors and entrepreneurs who want to start a business in Seychelles. I'm sure our listeners in Seychelles would agree that the tax-free zone is a great idea. But I'm also curious about the social services in Seychelles. How do you guys think Seychelles should balance its tax system with its social services? Should it prioritize tax benefits for foreign investors or focus on providing good social services for its citizens? I'm actually curious about what our listeners think about this. Do you guys think Seychelles should focus on tax benefits or social services? Let's move on to retirement plans for long-term immigrants in Austria and Seychelles. The retirement plan is based on a point system, where you earn points for working and paying taxes in Austria. I'm told that Austria also offers a pension supplement for foreigners who have worked in Austria for a certain period of time. This can be a big help for immigrants who are approaching retirement age and want to ensure they have a comfortable pension. Now, let's move on to Seychelles. In Seychelles, the retirement plan is based on a superannuation system, where you earn a certain amount of money each year for your retirement. I'm told that Seychelles also offers a pension fund for foreigners who have worked in Seychelles for a certain period of time. This can be a big help for immigrants who are approaching retirement age and want to ensure they have a comfortable pension. I'm sure our listeners in Seychelles would agree that the pension fund is a great idea. But I'm also curious about the social safety net in Seychelles. How do you guys think Seychelles should balance its pension fund with its social safety net? Should it prioritize pension benefits for foreigners or focus on providing a good social safety net for its citizens? I'm actually curious about what our listeners think about this. Do you guys think Seychelles should prioritize pension benefits or social safety net? Let's move on to social rights for long-term immigrants in Austria and Seychelles. In Austria, social rights are based on a social insurance system, where you earn points for working and paying taxes in Austria. I'm told that Austria also offers a social assistance program for foreigners who are in need. This can be a big help for immigrants who are struggling financially and need a safety net. Now, let's move on to Seychelles. In Seychelles, social rights are based on a social protection system, where you earn a certain amount of money each year for your social protection. I'm told that Seychelles also offers a social assistance program for foreigners who are in need. This can be a big help for immigrants who are struggling financially and need a safety net. I'm sure our listeners in Seychelles would agree that the social assistance program is a great idea. But I'm also curious about the social safety net in Seychelles. How do you guys think Seychelles should balance its social protection system with its social safety net? Should it prioritize social protection benefits for foreigners or focus on providing a good social safety net for its citizens? I'm actually curious about what our listeners think about this. Do you guys think Seychelles should prioritize social protection benefits or social safety net? Hey everyone! Welcome back to our podcast. Today, we're discussing the rate of meeting specific interests into the amazing countries Austria and Seychelles. I'm Mira, and I'm super to dive into this topic with my co-host, Leo.
That's right, Mira. And I'm stoked to be here, too. Austria and Seychelles, what a fascinating combination. I mean, who wouldn't want to talk about meeting specific interests in a country with world-class skiing and a tropical paradise?
Exactly. And I think our listeners will agree that both countries offer a unique blend of adventure and relaxation. So, let's start with Austria. Have you ever been to the Austrian Alps? Leo?
Oh, yeah. I've been to the Austrian Alps, and it's breathtaking. But, Mira, you know what's even more breathtaking? The number of Alpine clubs and hiking groups in Austria. I mean, there's literally something for everyone from beginner hikers to experienced mountaineers.
Well, that's amazing. I'm certain that our listeners living in Austria would agree with me. And speaking of clubs, have you heard about the Vienna Philharmonic Orchestra? Leo?
Ah, yes. The Vienna Philharmonic Orchestra is world-renowned. Mira, but did you know that there are also numerous music schools and conservatories in Austria that offer classes for musicians of all levels?
That's fantastic. I'm actually curious about what our listeners think about this. Do you think it's easier to meet specific interests in Austria or Seychelles?
That's a tough one, Mira. But I think Seychelles has a unique advantage when it comes to meeting specific interests. I mean, have you ever been to the Seychelles International Film Festival? Mira?
Oh no, I haven't. But I'd love to. And I'm sure our listeners would love to hear about it. So, tell us more about the film festival. Leo.
Well, the Seychelles International Film Festival is a fantastic event that brings together filmmakers and movie enthusiasts from all over the world. And did you know that there are also numerous film clubs and organizations in Seychelles that offer screenings and workshops for film buffs?
Wow, that's incredible. I'm actually starting a film club in my hometown. Leo, maybe our listeners can give me some advice on how to get started.
Ah, Mira, you're always full of great ideas. And I'm sure our listeners would be happy to help. But back to Seychelles, have you ever heard about the Seychelles Tourism Board's initiative to promote ecotourism? Mira?
Well, yes. I've heard about it. And I think it's fantastic that Seychelles is prioritizing ecotourism. I'm actually curious about what our listeners think about this. Do you think it's possible to balance tourism with conservation in Seychelles?
That's a great question. Mira. And I think Seychelles is doing a great job of finding that balance. But did you know that there are also numerous community-led initiatives in Seychelles that focus on conservation and sustainable tourism?
Oh, that's amazing. I'd love to hear more about those initiatives. Maybe our listeners can learn something new today.
Well, I think that's a great way to wrap up our discussion on the rate of meeting specific interests in Austria and Seychelles. And I'm sure our listeners will agree that both countries offer a unique blend of adventure, culture, and community engagement.
Absolutely. And before we sign off, I just want to remind our listeners to follow the Jet Off AI YouTube channel for more episodes like this. Hit that bell icon to catch our videos the moment they drop, and be among the first to listen.
And don't forget to share your thoughts, comments, and critiques below. Reading and responding to them truly brightens our day. Thanks for joining us, everyone. We'll be back soon with more. So until then, take care and see you in the next one. Warmest wishes from us.